Oh, are we live?
The proof is out there. Seek the proof.
Hey, and we are live. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, welcome.
All right, the proof is out there. Seek the proof. We have Amanda, as you can see, our co-host tonight. So what are we going to dig into, Amanda? What are we going to talk about?
Tonight we're going to talk about what the heck are enzymes, right? Like,
Right.
most of you have probably used distilling enzymes before, making a mash. Maybe some of you haven't. But there's a lot of really cool history, sources. We're going to get very nerdy, so be prepared. We're trying to keep it, beginner level, I guess. So I think the idea that Wayne and I talked about is we're going to walk into what are they, why do we need them, and then towards the middle to the end, we can get into some interesting facts. Instead of just jumping right in and telling you the crazy stuff, we'll walk into it first, right? What are enzymes?
Right. Yep. Got to have them.
Oh, and I just wanted to say, I am not the Bigfoot or the alien in the preview. That would be Wayne and Damon. I'm just the co-host. I'm like, which one am I? Yes. All right. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining in and watching. And with that, we'll get started. Do you want to start? How do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, we can start. I'll start if you want. So there's enzymes we have to have them in brewing. We have to have them in to get the starches, to get the sugar to begin with. A ferment itself, just sugar, yeast can work through that. But if it has starch, then it has to be converted to sugars, to dextrins, and then to simple sugars. So we have several different enzymes. We have alpha amylase and beta amylase and gluco. You want to walk them through mash process?
Sure, yeah. So if you're just fermenting sugar, right? Or you're not really needing any enzymes. It's really for when you have starches and you want to make a whiskey or a vodka with potatoes. Whenever you're trying to break down and cook your starches, most grain-forward recipes have enzymes in there somewhere, whether you realize it or not. Right. If it does not have the use of enzymes, or if you're making a moonshine mash where you're using sugar and corn, you'll still be getting alcohol from the sugar that you've added, but you're not going to be getting any alcohol really from the corn. Right. You'll release some of the sugars from the corn by cooking it, but what's going to happen is a lot of the flavor that you're going to get from the corn and the alcohol that the sugar from the corn can produce is going to be wasted without the use of these enzymes. And let me see if I learned how to share my screen. I've got some little images here. So enzymes are like little workhorses, right?
Yes, ma'am.
When we're talking about whiskey, we have amylase enzymes specifically. So,
yep. Alpha amylase is going to break down starch chains into shorter dextrins. Still not fermentable by yeast, but it gets a step closer.
Yep. So basically it's like a complex sugar, right? A starch. That's what's present, or the type of fermentability that we have in grain is a starch. That's a complex chain sugar, and yeast can't eat that. It's too complex for the yeast to consume. So we have to, cook it to gelatinize corn and start to really break it down. So cooking is the number one step in the mashing process. But the other half of it is using these enzymes at the right moment so that they can do their job. And they're going to take that complex sugar that is a starch and break them down into smaller, simple sugars, like what you see here.
Right. That's a great example, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I try. Let's see. I got some more. So yeah, and then I think you had touched on the different types of amylase, right? So there's lots of enzymes, and not to get
much.
Yeah, because we chatted and it was a little confusing, but we want to talk about the ones that are specifically used in distilling, just to keep it simple.
Right. So as you mentioned, the first one we're going to talk about is the alpha amylase, and so it's an enzyme that will break down these starches into, basically, just think of it like cooking or anything else. Or you're starting with something big and you want to cut it up into smaller pieces to make it easier to digest or easier to consume. So that's what the amylase is doing. The alpha amylase is going to break these starches down into dextrins. Now, and the yeast still can't get to those because they're still complexed. But that's where the beta amylase comes in, and it's going to take and it's going to work on those down and make them into simple sugars. As Amanda mentioned, the simple sugars is what the yeast need. It's what they have to convert to alcohol.
Yep. And I think you talked about a cool metaphor that I liked, which basically talks about there's 3 amylases, the alpha, beta, and gluco. We're putting them in at different temperatures because they have different temperature allowances, right? So if it's too hot, it's going to denature your enzymes. Yep. And alpha amylase usually has a higher temperature range. So alpha, it's stronger. It's going to go first. Basically what Wayne was just describing here is a little, it's like a visual, right? So you can kind of see what we're talking about, because it may be confusing, but the starch is complex and it's a chain sugar, right? It's complex chain sugar. Alpha amylase is going to go in first. So there's liquid alpha, which is actually kind of looks, a lot of you will look at it like this. There's also powdered alpha amylase. The liquid I like, especially the kinds that are high temperature, because you can put those in your mash right in the very beginning. Once you get boiling water on the grains, you can throw this in. It has a higher temperature range, so it can go in between 150 and 190 degrees. The alpha amylase, we're really using this as a tool to thin our mash.
Makes it a lot easier to, otherwise you got a glue pot. Yeah, I mean, it's really stiff.
And it really starts to become necessary when you're doing an all grain mash, right? If you're making a whiskey and you're not using any sugar, this alpha amylase is going to help thin that mash. We are talking about what we need when we're doing an all grain mash is basically anywhere from 2.5, sometimes as much as 3 pounds per gallon. Wayne, that's your favorite ratio to mash in,
right? I hate that one. Yeah. But no, you're right. I mean, you can do it. It can be done. But these enzymes make it really, really so much easier. The liquid enzyme, especially the high temp. Now, there's a route you can go if you don't have this and you're just using malted grains. Is on your way up on the cook, you can add a little bit of your malt, and it will, before it denatures, it will help loosen your mash up some.
Yeah, so I actually found this, which is perfect for what we're talking about. The next kind of amylase enzyme that we're going to talk about is beta, right? So beta amylase is the next temperature range. We usually will let the grains cook if they need to at a higher temperature, right? So if you're using a corn heavy mash, you're going to cook your corn for the highest temperature for the longest period of time, roughly about an hour before you can start incorporating other grains in, depending on obviously what kind of grains you're putting in your mash. But we're going to wait until it's about 149 degrees until we add beta amylase.
It's funny you say that. That's my 148 is my sweet spot. That's I feel it is like the best spot. But.
Yeah, I think I have that in the little book I wrote for my classes. It's like 148. And really, I've read 150, 149.
Yeah.
But 148 is a very safe place to put it in. What happens when we add it in at too high of a temperature is we're denaturing this enzyme. And we are relying on this to break down those sugars for us. If you're adding additional sugar or you're sugar bumping, you're going to get alcohol no matter what. But if you have no sugar, then you have to make the sugar, right? And what Wayne just mentioned, and what this little graph here shows is there is alpha amylase and beta amylase. You'll see an A and a B. They are both present in the grain in the malting process, right? So there is some alpha amylase being made when barley is malting. What I think is pretty cool, one thing I love to talk about is where do these enzymes come from?
Exactly.
What we have today are industrialized enzymes. They're concentrated, made in a lab. But alpha amylase is present in saliva or the digestive system of mammals. Right. So some people may be familiar with chicha, which is
Here we go.
I've been waiting for this one.
I know you have.
This is a beer in South American countries, and I think they actually maybe are doing it in some African countries as well that I see, where they're chewing and using the alpha amylase in their saliva to chew up corn, bananas, plantains, and then they're going to spit it out.
Yeah.
And the saliva is going to break down the starches for us. I'm sure there's wild yeast on the fruit or in our saliva, and it essentially makes a beer.
Yep.
Which I just love. It's a natural concentration of where do we find alpha amylase? Well, it's in the digestive systems of human beings and animals.
That's
Here's
right.
another image of the corn. Oh, this is a corn-based chicha. It's like without distilling, right? They're using their enzymes in the saliva to break it down.
You know, saliva enzymes. It's crazy how powerful.
Yeah.
That they are.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's interesting. Didn't you talk about your soup?
Yeah. So I noticed it. I'm gonna tell it. It's kind of gross.
You have to. It's pertinent.
So the other night Jen made some potato soup, and so I'm sitting here, and this soup is fairly thick, you know, and I really enjoy that. I like the thick, you know, and as I was eating it, I noticed it was getting thinner, and then, you know, getting kind of watery. I was like, what the hell's going on? And then it dawned on me that this from my mouth back to the spoon back in the soup, the enzymes were breaking stuff down.
Yeah. Gross.
I know. It is what it is.
No, I love that because it explains it. So why do we have these enzymes, right? Well, we eat food like starches and other things that are hard for our bodies to use. Yep. We can't just use the food we consume, but the enzymes break down the starches that we eat and make them easily digestible for us. So it's a great metaphor to see how it works in our stomachs, the same thing that it's doing in a mash for the yeast. The yeast is really small and it's lazy and it's a little pain, right? Like it wants everything super simple, and the most simplest, easiest things we can prepare the food for the yeast.
Right.
We have happy yeast. And beta amylase, while we're talking about beta amylase, right? Yeah. We showed examples of liquid and powder enzymes. But what if there was no Amazon? What if there was no internet? Where were distillers getting their enzymes from in the 1700s?
That's cool. That's a good question. There's several sources, as you mentioned. You know, we have it. Animals have it. In fact, calf stomach is where they get rennet to use to make cheese. That's an enzyme.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the main thing, you know, if I was to not have access to the liquid high temp enzymes, liquid enzymes, or any other type of that stuff, closest thing I could think to go to would be the grain. Malt that grain.
Yep. So the number one place that we can find beta amylase in nature is in malted grain. Specifically, we have malted barley. And that's because there is more concentration of these enzymes in the malted barley. So this is a picture of a malting floor. So they're taking malted barley and they are malting it for us. So basically in the malting process is the germination process, right? Malting, mm-hmm. What is malting? We're germinating the seed. We're taking barley or corn or rye, and we're letting that absorb moisture. And it's exactly like if a seed falls off of a plant, it falls into the ground, Mother Nature rains on that seed, the germination process begins. So when we're malting as distillers with the intention of generating these enzymes, we're tricking the seed into thinking that it's going to grow a plant, right? So then what begins to happen is
it gets a way better life and it gets to make something cool.
Yeah, way better than growing a plant, which could feed somebody. We are making whiskey with it. So this graph is pretty cool. I was trying to find a way to explain how the seed begins to generate these enzymes, right? So there's already some present, and every seed is exactly enough starch that can be converted to sugar to grow the plant. Because plants use the sun to produce, to photosynthesize and make their own energy. But before it can do that, before it's green, right? it's relying on the sugar or the starch that's in that seed. Every seed is just enough to grow a plant. It's going to be able to generate enough amylase to break down the starch within that seed so it can feed and generate a plant. And this kind of just shows, I don't know what's happening. Forgive me. Wayne didn't want to be in charge of the pictures, by the way. So
I suck at that stuff.
So this is just showing in the beginning, right? We steep out, or when we're moisturizing the grains, this is when the water gets to it. And then down here are the hours through the malting process, right? So 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, you're going to begin to see these enzymes become more and more till the point where we reach the peak of enzymes. And then we want to stop the germination process. So we're tricking the seed into growing. It's going to generate these enzymes naturally. Mother Nature just does this. But if we let it go too far past the peak, what happens is it begins to then use those enzymes to grow a plant, right? What we have right here. So right here is where we want to stop it.
Right.
Where the root is emerging.
Over modified if you go too long, and then you're losing the what you're going to gain from brewing. You're going to lose that, or start losing it.
And you malt a lot of your own grain, right?
I do. I do, and sure. So that's more than likely that's some looks like wheat, or could be rye. I can't tell. I can't see that good from here. But what I like to do, one of the things people don't realize is the efficiency of your home malting is not going to generally be as good as a house malt. A malt house or somebody that's malting these grains, they're selected by size so that their germination rate is more similar. We just have, say, I go out here and I'll grab some rye out of my bag of rye and then I'll do the soak on it, but they're going to sprout. They'll be staged a little bit different from each other. But so the malt, some of them are going to be, when I dry it, some of them will probably be reaching just past the peak that you just mentioned, Amanda. They'll be at that peak, some past that peak, and some coming up to that peak, but they're not all going to be right in the sweet spot. But yeah, that's.
So how do you identify how do you know, right, when your malt is ready to stop that germination process?
Okay, so you can see on there the rootlets. Those are the little fine, hairy looking portions. And then there's a acrospire that follows the length of the grain right underneath the edge of the hull. And I like to stop it when that acrospire reaches 3/4 to the length of that grain.
I think you have an image that you shared with me here. Would that be this one?
That would be that one. You can see the acrospire on those. Some of them are halfway, some of them are full length. And so that's generally where I end up. Some of them's right at the peak, some of them's almost to the peak. And but it still works, and I malt more for flavor than I do for enzymes. But some grains do better than others. Triticale has been one of the best ones I've done. I would actually mashed in, converted an all grain mash with Triticale malt that I did here, and got full conversion, and it came out really good.
Interesting. I would be curious to see what the the diastatic power of the Triticale would be.
I would too. I hear it's it's part wheat and part rye, and they both are fairly decent.
So diastatic power, really quickly, in case anyone watching doesn't know what the heck we're talking about. Diastatic power is how much power these enzymes have, right? Like, what is their conversion power? So I made these cute little definition cards for you guys.
I like them.
The measure of total enzyme activity in the malt. So how strong is it? And to explain that to you, for example, here I have corn compared to barley. So why do we use malted barley mainly instead of malted corn? So let's just quickly go back to the 1700s, right?
Yep.
If you were a whiskey maker in the 1700s, you don't have the internet, so you rely on the malting process to do the conversion for you. And you would either malt all of the grains in your mash bill. If, say, you're making a corn whiskey, you have 100% corn, then you would need to malt generally all the corn in that mash bill. So here we have malted corn has enough diastatic power to convert its own weight. and I usually explain this because it helps us to then understand that malted barley, in comparison, has enough diastatic power to convert nearly 5 times its own weight. So if I have an all grain mash bill and I'm using 100 pounds of grain, then I need only 20 pounds of distiller's malt or malted barley to do that other 100 pounds.
Right.
If I was doing 100 pounds of corn, then I would need 100% of that corn to be malted in order for the malted corn to convert its own weight. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Matt Terrell had us a question here, Amanda. He says, if you malt your own grains, how long can you store them after the malting before use?
Yeah.
Just like any other malted grain, you can store it as long as you keep it dry. If it's malted, I wouldn't try to hang on to it too long, because the longer it sets, the diastatic power starts to dwindle on it, and it's better fresh. But yeah, you can keep them. You actually put them in the freezer and keep them in there as well, if you have room.
Yep.
Good question, Matt.
That is a good question. And then
let's see.
So we have, we talked about alpha amylase, which is present in saliva.
Right.
Another really cool place that alpha amylase, which I've read, is so it's present in apples, right?
Yep.
So there is pectic enzyme naturally occurring and alpha amylase in apples.
Right.
And there's lots of different fruits that they have these enzymes present in them. I think it's kind of Mother Nature's way to guarantee that if the fruit falls on the ground and is not consumed, that it's going to break down and feed those seeds that are inside of it so that they can grow back into a plant. Right? That's my assumption.
They basically are going to, their job is, along with the yeast that's on those fruits, is to consume that decaying fruit, it breaks it down. Those enzymes that's what they're there for, to break down those, like pectinase breaks down the cell walls. Apples have it. Sweet potatoes have it. Sweet potatoes have amylase, both alpha and beta. Mm-hmm. They're kind of tricky though,
right?
Because you got to cook them so much to get them to gelatinize, and you've denatured the enzymes. So Amanda's got a neat trick to kind of work around that with the sprouts.
Yeah. So sweet potatoes are not as strong for the diastatic power.
Right.
They don't have as much enzymes as distiller's malt does. So what is distiller's malt? Very quickly, I have a little picture. So it's malted barley, right? Because barley has the most present concentration of these enzymes. But there's 2-row barley and 6-row.
Right.
Let me share that really quickly. Sometimes I like a visual of that, because not everybody's like, what is 2-row barley? What is 6-row? Yeah. The difference between the two types of barley is simply, once that pops up, we'll see it here.
Beer brewers use a lot of 2-row, and it gets toasted in different levels for their beers.
Yeah. Yeah. So that literally there's 2 rows on the stalk, or there's 6 rows on the stalk all the way around. Mm-hmm. For some reason, 6-row has a higher concentration of the enzymes than 2-row does. But there are 2-row versions today that are being selectively bred so that they have higher diastatic power, right?
Yeah.
So there is more common. There is some 2-row distiller's malt. Generally speaking, 6-row is distiller's malt and 2-row is brewer's malt. Mm-hmm. If you buy specialty malts like crystal malt, honey malt, chocolate malt, coffee malt, these are 2-row malted barleys. And in the malting process, when we do the germination, we freeze and stop the germination before it grows a plant. And then we are drying it in a kiln. Kiln drying. So on a large scale, it's going to look like this. It's like an oven that doesn't get too hot to denature the enzyme, but gets hot enough to dry out the seed and dehydrate it. And I thought this is pretty cool, Wayne, what you do at home. And maybe it would be good for you to explain, how exactly do you toast or dry your malt to prepare it so it stops the germination process?
Okay. So most of the time when I dry my malt, and you can see I'm using these fairly good sized cookie sheets. What I like about those is I can put a few pounds of malt on that cookie sheet. I can cover that with water, let it do its soak. And small grains, usually in between 3 and 4 day mark, they're ready to start to dry. So what I'll do is I'll put them in here. I'll let them germinate. I'll keep it covered, keep it sprayed, keep it rotated. and it's hard to do when you're working. But you come home and you go and you roll them around and keep them broke up. But then when I dry them, I generally like to dry them out, either air dry them, or if you got a way to use low heat and not get very hot, say I wouldn't go much over 100 or so. You don't get it too hot. But I use the oven for toasting. Like when I make my chocolate rye malt, I do it in the oven. If I make I like toasted oats, so I put them in the oven at like 385, and when they start to smell like cookies, it's like, okay, that's the time to pull them out and let's go mash in.
Yeah.
But there's different temperatures for different malt levels or different toast levels. But I think toasting the malts, it's just something I see a lot of craft, our home distillers getting into, because they're searching for something different. They want something that stands apart, and we've got the perfect opportunity to play around with things and try things that big distilleries can't do.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's, there's a lot of things. That's how we learn things, playing around, toasting malt, making malt, seeing if you can
get complexity of flavors that come out of the different levels of toast, which is really nice to play with. I see a question from Scott about shredding the sweet potatoes. So I was going to just explain a little bit about the malted barley, but then to get back to the sweet potatoes, sprouted sweet potatoes, right? It's essentially similar to sprouting the barley. So when we sprout the sweet potatoes, there's already enzymes present in the sweet potatoes, like there is in the grain, but through the sprouting process of the potatoes, we're getting more enzymes. So exactly like the grain, we're going to germinate or sprout those potatoes to concentrate the enzymes in there. And then before it goes too far into the growth process, where before it starts to grow potatoes, a sprouted potato, the skin of the potato or the spuds coming off, the sprouts, actually have a higher level or concentration of the enzymes. So shredding the potatoes, as far as mashing the potatoes, Wayne, I think you could speak to shredding them. Get that up.
So honestly, you can, if you can sit there and hold those sweet potatoes long enough, just like corn. We a lot of us cook corn at 180, 190 because we want to hurry up and get it gelatinized, but it'll gelatinize at 160, or other grains will gelatinize lower. I think sweet potatoes, they were probably, if you was to shred them and did a slow cook or put them in a mash pot and hold your water at 145, 148 long enough for them to break down, you probably would get all the enzymes available without denaturing them. But shredding them, I cut them. I usually chop them up pretty small, but if I had a way to shred them, I absolutely would.
I think too, if you wanted to just do sweet potatoes. So again, I think I always ask myself when I learn about interesting new things, I think Sean Peterman from Appalachian Plateau Copper Company was the first one to bring up to me sprouted sweet potatoes and had said, have you ever heard about this? So then he and I dived down this rabbit hole where we started reading about it and learning about it. And I always think, why was this started? Who was doing this? Why were they doing this? And most of these things come out of necessity, right? So if you had access to barley, you were malting barley. If all you had access to, if you were a potato farmer, if you were a sweet potato farmer, again, the natural order of farming back in the day was to distill and ferment to distill to preserve your crop. So if you were a potato farmer or you were somewhere where they just had access to potatoes, you would have to then rely on sprouting those potatoes. And I think probably what happened was they're making alcohol out of the potatoes, relying on the low levels of amylase that were present just in the potatoes. And then eventually they did it with sprouted potatoes because the potatoes sprouted and they used them anyway. And they realized that more alcohol came from the sprouted potatoes. And I did read a cool paper that's called Sprouted Sweet Potato Flour. So at some point, people were sprouting sweet potatoes, dehydrating them and grinding them into flour to use them for a concentration of enzymes. And there was a study that showed malted millet, which is like a wheat, right? Millet.
It's a little small seed. Yeah, it's kind of you see it a lot in chicken feed. Actually, it's a little bitty round berries.
Okay, yeah. So, and they were comparing that to the enzymes or the diastatic power of a sweet potato, and they found that when they added the sweet potato to the malted grain, it increased the diastatic power of the malted grain.
Yep.
It contributed, right? Like it contributed some
yeah.
conversion power.
Yeah, that's one thing I haven't done with sweet potatoes yet, and I think the next batch I do, I'm going to do a sweet potato grain, because I usually just do sweet potatoes and then add some cane flour to it. But yeah, I think I want to do some grains this time and see what kind of, maybe malt some millet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's so I love the history of distilling, and I think a lot of the history of distilling has been relied on malted grains. And one thing I like to explain to people is that American whiskey has changed. The flavor profile of American whiskey has changed for lots of reasons over the last 100 years, even. One, because the types of grains we have access to now, we did not are not the same as what we had in the 1800s or 1700s. Farmers grow the grain that is more efficient for them, or they make more money from it, and it's not always a change because of flavor. Sometimes it's a change because of efficiency or profitability. So our grains have changed, but a huge impact, flavor impact in American whiskey. And I believe I heard Todd Leopold from Leopold Brothers talk about this, is the amount of malt, the percentage of malted grain that we relied on. So early distillers would have relied on a minimum of 20% malt in their mash bill, anywhere between 20% to 100% malted grain. To convert and make alcohol out of those grains. Today, we don't need the malted grain because we have the liquid or the powder enzymes. So we are able to eliminate that. And again, this is an innovation out of a necessity. I believe in sometime in the 1900s, I'm not sure exactly when, like in the 30s or 40s, I saw somewhere around the 30s or 40s is when they really started to like industrialize the enzymes. And then there was the drive for ethanol, right? There was the ethanol boom.
Fuel,
so that's where it became more readily available to help produce more alcohol for fuel needs. And distillers learned that these were more efficient and consistent. You know, they could just consistent, repeatable results with the industrialized enzymes like the liquid alpha or the powdered glucoamylase that we have today.
And they're so concentrated.
Yes. Yeah. They will do a better job than just the old way of doing just malted barley.
Yeah. That little bottle you showed, that will do hundreds of pounds of grain. It's crazy how it'll do.
Yeah. And then there's, so it's efficiency, it's replicatable results. There's human error that comes along with the malted grain, right? Because as a distiller, if we put those in the mash at too high of a temperature, we could denature and destroy the enzymes.
Right.
You have to also think about the amount of work and labor that goes into the malted grain. It costs more because it takes more time and energy to produce the malted grain. Yeah, like 7 days of someone's work, and then the transportation to get it gas to transport that grain.
You mentioned a while ago about the amount of historical distillers, the amount of malt that they would have to use just to convert their mash. And what people don't realize is even then their mash conversion was still relatively, inefficient compared to what we do today.
Right.
Their finishing gravity might be a 0.010 instead of a 0.999 or whatever. They're leaving some sugars behind or some unconverted starches. And you've got to taste some of those wonderful spirits of old. So there is a quantitative difference in what was and what is. Yeah.
I have had the privilege of tasting some really old spirits that have been preserved by collectors that, had an appreciation for them. And honestly, there's whiskey from the early 1900s, right? Like we're talking 1910. And then there's some whiskey from the late 1800s. And I would have to say that the whiskey I've tasted from the 1800s far exceeds the early 1900s. And 1902 was delicious. I tasted a bottle from 1902. Mount Vernon whiskey. And then once we get to like 1906 and 1910, 1911, I don't know if alcohol production starts to become industrialized somewhere in that area, but the quality changes drastically.
Oh wow.
They were all from different distilleries. It's just what my observation is that
Right.
the early 1800s alcohol, which you would think alcohol from that period probably wouldn't be that good anymore, probably oxidized. It was actually very good.
That's awesome.
And it is an example of, 20% to 100% malted grains. That's what Todd Leopold from Leopold Brothers actually got a census report from early United States, the very first distilleries, I believe from the 1700s.
Wow.
I don't know exactly from when, but he used the census report where they interviewed all different distilleries and they asked, what's the best grain you're using? What kind of mash bills are you using? And it's just a series of questions. What kind of distilling equipment are you using? And they took an average and they put what is the most common out of all these different questions. And he said he just went to replicate that. What's really cool is that there's some modern distilleries today that are going back and they're trying to make or remake this early American whiskey by one, using the old heirloom grains that would have been used at that time, and two is using the enzymes or the natural enzymes in the malted grain. So doing away with the industrialized concentrated enzymes and using the malted grain. And the distillers that are doing this are going to tell you that the product that they make tastes better because one, it's not as processed. Two, it's a natural type of conversion. It's natural. It's not concentrated in a lab somewhere. Right. And I don't know, you can speak on this, Wayne, but I think a malt heavy whiskey tastes better than a non-malted whiskey, but there's a lot of flavor coming from the malt.
One of the things I was going to mention a while ago, you were talking about exogenous enzymes, that we use because their efficiency, their availability, and, they work damn good. But there's one thing that they can't do, and they can't add that malt flavor to that whiskey.
Yeah.
You can't get that richness and complexity from a unmalted grain that you're going to get from a malted grain. And so I always prefer malt. Even if I'm not using enough for full conversion and I'm relying on these enzymes, if I add some malt to that whiskey, it's going to have some complexity deeper than it would if I hadn't have. So
definitely.
I love malt.
And you had said it's not as efficient, right? The enzymes we're getting from just relying on the malt. Say you want to make a mash bill and you want to try to make it the old school way and you don't want to use the liquid or powder enzymes. What you're going to want to try to do is get a distiller's malt and you try to use it in your mash bill at a ratio of 20%. So whatever your mash bill is, make sure you have 20% distiller's malt. Do you use any different ratios when you're doing your
you need like a DP of at least in the mid 30s to get full conversion on stuff. When you start doing, there's calculators out there that you can get and to help people out figure this out. We can chat on groups and talk about it, but I rarely use barley malt. I mean, I do use some, but one of my favorites, because I like a wheated bourbon or a wheated whiskey period. I like rye over bourbon, but I like use a lot of wheat. I use a lot of wheat. Red wheat is really, really nice. It makes it goes great with a lot of heirloom corns. I like it. I've got one that I'm working on that's Amanda Palmer corn and barley and red wheat. And
sounds good.
So I like using wheat. It's good. But it's all fun to malt all these grains. I was a little nervous. You hear people talking about, you can get ergo if you malted oats or malted rye if you're not careful.
What is that? Can you explain what that is?
Well, I'll do my best. It's kind of like if anybody's ever tripped on acid, ergo will send you on a mind trip. And people died from it.
Wasn't that in bread?
Yeah, it was in bread, and people actually died from it. But if you watch what you're doing, it's really hard today because people are selling grains, they're testing these grains, and they're keeping an eye on all that stuff. But I've had real good luck with rye and wheat and oats. They're all easy to malt, real easy to malt.
And I think it's important to understand the malting process like how you do, because Me as a distiller, I pride myself in having these skills. So, propagation of yeast, understanding fermentation, distillation, being
Hmm.
able to be self-reliant, and malting is a huge part of that process. So, if the internet goes down, if we don't have any power, if society collapses, right? I mean, you're
Hmm.
going to need to figure out how to malt if you want to continue to distill. Unless you're distilling a rum, we're using molasses, cane sugar, or anything like that. That sugar does not require enzymes because the sugar is readily available. It's already a simple sugar.
And yeast produces invertase, which they use to convert any sugars to more simple sugars. They produce it on their own as well. That's kind of neat.
Okay. That is kind of neat. Yeah, that's something new that I just learned. I heard you talk about that yesterday. I had that down, but I was going to let you do the invertase.
I mean, yeast can work on stuff, but sometimes they're a lot slower. Those other enzymes that we use, that helps them out a lot, you know. But
Yeah.
a yeast would never, get through an unconverted mash. There's no way that could happen. Although there's Angel Yellow that's out now. I think you
Oh
have
wait,
something there.
I do. Hold on, and I can talk about what. Oops, talk about what that is, the combination of it. So
Have
there's
you
something
used it?
called the. I have used it once, to play with it. So we have the alpha amylase, beta amylase, glucoamylase is the third one. It's the one we usually add last. It has the lowest temperature range, and it's somewhere around 110 in like the 90s ballpark. And again, some of the enzymes are different. Like I've used powder, I've used liquid of gluco and alpha, and follow the directions on your packaging because some of it will say, oh, yes, who did that? Thank you. Some of it will say, what the temperature allowance is, but Yellow Label Distillers is made by Angel. Some people love it. It was really, really popular for a little while. Essentially, what this is a dry active distiller's yeast. What's cool about it is they advertise that you don't need to do a cereal cook. You don't need to cook your grains. If you just add this yeast alone, it will break down and convert your starches for you, and the fermentation will work. What this
Hmm.
is, why this is happening is because it is a dry active distiller's yeast, just like a
Yep.
deity. But added to it is enzymes. So then we have alpha and I believe beta amylase is
Yes.
added in here.
Yeah.
And then there is koji enzyme. So the third is glucoamylase.
Yep.
While alpha is present in saliva and digestive tracts of mammals and in lots of different fruits, beta is concentrated in things that generally have starch, like grains. The koji is a bacterial enzyme. Glucoamylase, the last stage of enzymes that we
Hmm.
have, is generally a fungal or bacterial type of enzyme. And
Right.
koji is a simple way to explain that. So I have an example of koji here, but that's
Yeah.
what's present. That's going to chew up your starches and convert those for you. And it actually is supposed to enhance flavor. You do some distilling with rice, right, Wayne?
I have, yeah, I do, but I have not done koji yet. But so one of the things I mentioned to you the other day was, oh yeah, you can see the mold
Yeah.
on the yeah. One of the things I mentioned to you, that same little black specks and stuff that's on there is found on the skins of onions. If you've ever noticed a little black patch
Yes.
that pops up on the onion, that's what that is. So I guess if you wanted to, you could let that happen and try to get that started on your own.
Yeah, so I actually did that with my friend Mike Dombrowski. He is a master yeast terrier. He's another distiller. He's super smart, really, really nice guy. But we experimented with some of these types of enzymes or yeasts, and we did aspergillus. So there's
Yep.
Marook, aspergillus. These are used in, I want to say, like Asian countries, or where they don't have an abundance of grains. They mostly have rice.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing the conversion where they're relying on aspergillus, koji, and things like that to break down starches for them
Yeah.
because they don't necessarily have, or it's just not common to do the malted barley there. And that was just another example of region, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just like depending on where you're located, you're going to use what you have access to. And I've seen, this is a really cool story. I've seen Mark Rogers use bacterial enzymes and not even know he was doing it. He showed me how to do he called it souring the corn. And what that is, it's very similar to how they do it in some Asian countries. I've seen videos of women doing it in Vietnam where they're doing a solid ferment. Where they're,
Yeah, solid state fermentation. Yeah.
Yep, they are basically hydrating the corn with hot water, just enough so that the corn plumps up and rehydrates. And then you let it set for a couple days and you come back and there's this, it's like a mold on top, and it looks like it's ruined. It's like a film on top of the grain. And we came back to the still site, and you scrape that off, and right underneath of it, it had developed this bacterial fungus, and it broke down all of the grains without cooking it or adding any enzymes. And then we were able to then add hot water to that, and it liquefied the mash and turned it into a mash without doing a cereal cook, without using any enzymes. I just always thought that was interesting because he was, showing me, it looked gross. If I hadn't had him show it to me, I probably wouldn't have used that corn.
Right.
But
right.
To see when we scraped the fungus off the top, how it had broken down those complex starches into simple sugars, and we mashed in the mash, and he goes, this sour in the corn is a great way to make a really good corn mash. And these old timers knew these techniques. They knew that it worked. Not to discount them just because they couldn't explain the science behind it. That's just my crazy brain where I'm like, I see this working. I need to understand why it's working. I have this really cool example from a book that I'm translating. It was written in the 1700s, but they talk about how to operate a distillery. And on one page, it just gives you a perspective, right, of what the 1700s distiller who was malting or using malted grains would have done. But they say, it goes without saying that even unmalted grain yields good whiskey, but by no means as much. However, whoever malts half or 3/4 of their grain, be it rye, buckwheat, barley, wheat, or oats, has the best chance of getting more whiskey than they would have expected. Malting causes the grain to release all of its juices, or rather the spirit it contains.
Wow.
So while they weren't questioning the science behind it, they still knew that when they malted the grain at a certain ratio, they were getting back a lot more alcohol. So I always love that portion because it just kind of shows the perspective of how they describe it, that it was releasing more of its juices.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought that up. It's the old timers, like you said, they knew what worked. They might not know why the hell it works.
Yep.
But they know what worked and they do it.
Yeah.
They'll say, oh, you got to put a gallon of malt corn on top of your mash. But we ain't adding no yeast. Well, that gallon of malt corn contains all kinds of yeast. So, I mean, it's just they didn't know why. They just, that's what makes it kick. That's why it works. But
that's Jim Tom did it that way. Mark Rogers does it this way. Huck, Popcorn Sutton, they all used malt, or they would call, the recipe would call for so much malt. And I know Mark and Huck, they're using malted wheat bran. They literally will come up to at the end of the making a mash. They have this little gallon Ziploc bag. They're like, that's the yeast. This is the malt. They call it making the yeast. And they just sprinkle this malt at the very end over top of the mash, and they let it work. Back in the day, they might not have understood how much power the malted grain had. They just knew that adding it made more or better whiskey than the lack of it.
Also provides nitrogen. The malt provides nitrogen, which the yeast need for for good fermentation and health.
Yeah.
So
happy yeast.
Yep.
I've heard Dwight Bearden is a guy from North Georgia who's an old-time moonshiner, and he's explained how they would malt the corn. I've seen a video of Jim Tom doing it the same way, but they had just corn, right? And they may not have had malted barley, but they would take and malt all their corn. So in order to do that, they take 25 pounds of corn. They would split a 50-pound bag in half, and they would put 25 pounds of corn in the sack, soak it in the creek, or soak it in warm water so that it rehydrated. Then they would let it sit somewhere, depending on how warm it was, for a couple days.
Right.
But the reason they would put 25 pounds in the 50-pound sack was so it had more air exposed to it, because the warmth and the oxygen and the moisture is important in germination and the malting of the grains.
Very is, especially with corn. Corn seems to be, for me, one of the, it's easy to sprout, but it seems to be one of the toughest grains to get to full full malt level without getting fungus or mold or sticky or stinky. And
yeah. I took corn to Mark Rogers when I wanted to learn how to malt because I was working with him at the time in those couple years, and I thought, what better person to go to malt grains than to go to Mark Rogers?
Yep.
And he basically was like, go to Walmart, get those. They're like under the bed totes. You know, they're like this tall, and they're big and flat, and they can slide under the bed, and white towels and a watering can, and bring the corn to me. So I went and we got all the stuff we needed, and I went and he and Huck showed me how to malt the corn. But it took several days, probably longer than the small grain, because I've never malted small grain.
Small grain, I usually I'm done by the fourth day, you know, or in the drying mode by the fourth day. But corn, no. Corn takes a little longer unless you're just chip malting.
Yes, and chip malting is?
Chip malting is stopping or malting the grain and stopping it prematurely before it reaches its peak.
Yeah.
I did that I had some Jimmy Red and some Amanda Palmer. And the reason I've used Amanda was to tone down Jimmy Red a little bit. Like I say, some Jimmy Red, it's a little bolder corn than a lot of the other corns. But I find chip malting it, or any corn for that matter, really changes the flavor of that mash or that finished spirit. There's something in that malting process. Like I said, you know, malt's beautiful. I love malt. Even chip malting changes the flavor profile for the better.
Yeah. And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say Alan Bishop is the one who told me about that. He said, you need to try this. And so, you know, it's good to know people. He's a wealth of information, and that's, you know, like you got Huck and those guys, you know, that's, you know, it's nice to have get somebody's opinion on something that somebody that knows.
Yeah, definitely. And so experimenting, it's great when you have resources and you can lean on your laurels.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I really love about all of this is there's never something that you can't learn. There's always a rabbit hole to go down.
Yes. Yeah, I want to tell everybody watching, when Wayne and I prepared for this episode, we went over like topics we wanted to touch on, tried to kind of like, and then we had to keep telling ourselves or each other, we can't go down the rabbit hole too far because I don't want to like make it boring or lose people with science mumbo jumbo. And it's very easy to get down a rabbit hole. And that's what the beauty of distilling and learning about distilling and the history of distilling for me is, because it's never ending education. Doesn't matter what topic it is, or to master the craft is almost impossible because there's just endless information to learn about spirits and regions and techniques and time periods. But that's why I love to try to incorporate it's all important when you're trying to understand a topic. It's the history of it's important, the science is important, regional practices are important. It makes you have a better understanding of the big picture. So what we were just talking about was chip malting or par malting the grain. Yeah. And actually, my friend Eric Wolf, who's a fantastic distiller from Lidditz, PA. Oh yeah. Shout out Soul Wolf Distillery. So I was talking to him about some rye, and he brought up sheathing to me. So sheathing is, if any farmers out there, you would know what sheathing was, but sheathing is a method of farming where when you harvest the grains in the field, specifically small grain, I only recently learned this talking to farmers, right? Because I know about distilling. I don't know a lot about farming and the preparation of grain, but I'm trying to educate myself. But the farmers will leave the corn to dry on the stalks before they harvest it. And some small grain is done the same way. So there's a process called sheathing where they would do this because of necessity, whether they had so much grain to harvest at once, whether they were fearing a frost or heavy rain or something, and they needed to harvest early. They would cut all the small grain down, let's just say rye, and they would bundle it in these sheaths. So if you see like a bundle of grain that's tied together, you see that a lot in imagery, especially in the fall. But that is sheathing the grain in the field. And they would either bundle it up like that and lay it down, or they would stand it up. But when the grain was sheathed, there was things that would occur, right? It would take several days for them to then come back in the field and pick up all this grain. And while it was sheathed or tied together like that, there's moisture.
Mm-hmm.
It will begin to generate its own heat. And then it becomes the exact environment for germination or malting.
Exactly.
So the grain, while sheathed, would begin to make enzymes. And then the farmers would come back, harvest that grain, and use it to make whiskey. And the sheathed grain would have a little bit more enzymes, or would be partially malted, not completely malted. But so a lot of the rye whiskey back in the day, they would have malted a portion of it, or they wouldn't have had to malt as much of it because of the sheathing process of the grain.
Right.
So the enzymes that were present in the rye without malting would have been concentrated enough to make whiskey. Now, back then, they were getting a lower yield than what we're used to today, most likely.
Yeah, and a typical rye mash starting gravity back then would probably only have been about a 1050, or so. They weren't shooting for. There's a lot of people today. They don't, they keep their gravity, especially with rye, 1050, 1055. I don't like to go over 1060, 1065 with it because it's, you've worked rye, it's sticky. It's because of glucans.
Yeah.
Wheat is the same way. So not as bad as rye, but yeah, wheat is pretty sticky.
Yes, for sure. Sticky. I just thought the sheathing technique was
That is very interesting. Very. Yeah. I didn't know that until you were talking to me the other day and you mentioned that. And I was like, I've seen them. But it didn't, start to put two and two together. And that's what I'm learning, that's what we do this for. We learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, just the cool people that we know, our friends. And for me, when I started distilling, just to be honest, I had enzymes. I used them sometimes. I was using a lot of sugar with my corn, so I was getting back alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, when I first started distilling, I didn't have a computer or a cell phone. I didn't know anyone else that did it. I got a book. I started replicating recipes out of the book that called for sugar. And a lot of the recipes I found as a beginner didn't have enzymes or an explanation of how to use them.
Right.
They didn't even always have malt or an explanation of how to use it. And it was just, I was like, oh, malt. I didn't understand the necessity of it.
Right.
Without using these enzymes, you are not utilizing any of the fermentable sugars that can come from your grains. That's like the number one takeaway you should have is if you're not using enzymes properly, you're wasting all that fermentable sugar that comes from your grains. And that's where the flavor comes from, right? If you ferment sugar, you're getting slightly neutral flavored spirit compared to if you're completely converting all the starches and then using the sugar from your grain, then the alcohol is going to taste like the grain. And I don't know about you or you guys watching, but for me, when I make a mash bill and I choose my grains and then I take all the time to cook it properly and I wait for it to ferment, I want to taste what I put into it. Like I want to taste oats. I want to taste wheat. I want to taste special Amanda Palmer corn, and I want to taste the difference in different grains. So if you're not using your enzymes properly, you're not getting that. You're wasting it. You're leaving stuff on the table, and you might as well just throw the corn away.
And you're right. A good distiller will play with these different grains, learn what each one brings to the table, and that's how you build your mash bill. I mean, part of it is necessity. You've got to have a certain amount of malt to get your conversion, but being able to do, say, a corn, and we'll see I'm doing a corn and a rye, and then I take part of my rye, malted rye, and I toast it just a little. I mean, but the learning how to use those grains and use them to create a flavor bridge of all these flavors. You learn how to build a mash bill by experimenting, and like you're saying, like you were just saying, you want to taste all those grains. You want, when you build something like that, and if you're going to barrel age it, you want some of those things for that barrel. That barrel is a flavor component, but you don't want that barrel to bury what it was or what it is.
Yeah. It will mask like the raw ingredients that you use to begin with. And some people prefer a mature spirit, right, where the barrel takes heavy flavor profile over the other components. I like a more grain forward or a younger whiskey. I love it at 2 years. I think that's a sweet spot, but it just depends on the person. But if you really want to get everything out of your grains and, I tell my personal experience because it makes people understand why we're talking about this. Because for a couple of years, I had enzymes, we like the liquid or the powder ones, and we would use them. And then sometimes I wouldn't use them if I ran out of them. Where I live, there's nowhere for me to go to that's close
Right.
by to get these things. And I did not understand what malted grains did and that they had the enzymes present in them at the time when I was just first learning.
Right.
Until I started working with Chris Yahara. Really,
Yeah.
he's where I really got a solid understanding of saccharification.
Yep.
What is saccharification? Saccharification is the making of sugar, right? So what the
Right.
enzymes are doing for us, they are breaking down complex starches or chain sugars into simple chain sugars and really making them into fermentable sugars.
Right.
And saccharification is the process of breaking those down.
Yeah.
I had a little thing here I was trying to share, but I don't know where that went.
Yeah. When I started, I was a beer brewer before I was a distiller. So I knew about the malted grains, but there was only like one place on the internet at the time that had anything to do with distillation, and there was a whole lot of sugar stuff and not a whole lot of all grain. And so I kind of went in it all grain first, and I did sugar shine and stuff, the Uncle Jesse style stuff later. But yeah, the figuring out malts, I mean, because of having a brewer background, I know that I can, if I got 3 pounds of barley malt, I can convert a crap ton of corn.
Yeah.
It's just something you pick up along the way, but not knowing that, yeah, it's a big learning curve. It can be.
Mm-hmm. And I started with equal amounts of, actually, it was more sugar and less corn in the very beginning when I was learning how to make alcohol.
Right.
And then I started reading more and learning more. So I started using equal amounts of sugar and corn. And then some of my friends that were sampling my products, they were like, we don't like how this tastes anymore. It tastes too much like corn, right? So I'm like, well, what do you want? It's moonshine. It's supposed to taste like corn. Some people just prefer the sugar to the grain. And what I try to teach in my classes is the 1-to-1-to-1 mash bill, because it's really simple. It's easy. It's hard to mess up, and it guarantees you're going to have alcohol.
Right.
It teaches you how to convert grain on a small scale because you're using a little bit of malt in there or enzymes. But that 1-to-1-to-1 is where I like people to try to start with. And if you can master that, that means 1 pound of fermentable ingredient, which is the variable X, that could be corn, apples, blackberries, strawberries, whatever. 1 pound of ingredient to 1 pound of sugar for every 1 gallon of water. It gives a good ratio for fermentation. And then as you learn that, you can figure out how to either increase your sugar to have a higher yield or decrease your sugar and increase your fermentable ingredient to get a more flavorful spirit.
Right.
But you're not going to get a more flavorful spirit unless you're figuring out how to do your conversion. Mashing is with grain is cooking that grain so it breaks down and gelatinizes, and then using your enzymes at the right time, right in their temperature windows. And then just generally speaking, alpha is, it depends on the type of alpha. High temp can go in around 190 to 150. And then beta is next. Beta is recommended to go in below 150, but probably 148 to about 140. And what happens is if you put it in too low of a temperature, if I put my alpha amylase in at 135, it's not really going to do the work it did. It's more active in its recommended temperature range.
Right.
So it's important to add it at the right time. If you forget and you add it later, it'll still work, but it's not going to work as efficiently for you.
Yeah. The pH plays a factor in their efficiency as well. I don't have those exact numbers, but but yeah, they're everything. The window's pretty good. I mean, it's really hard to screw up using enzymes, but yeah,
I think at least with my class where we're mashing in at is somewhere around. It's a little over 5.2 usually, like 5.6 when we finish our mash, right? So then the enzymes are generally you always check your pH at the end. And I don't really check my pH. I do it to show other people how to do it. But we're normally checking our pH if we have a fermentation issue, like if the mash stalls or you're using a new water source or If you're using a very acidic ingredient, check your pH. But generally, you want the pH. Yeast likes it somewhere around 5.2, 5.4.
Right.
And if you start out a little above that, a little more alkaline and less acidic, what happens through fermentation is it's going to gradually work down to the number. So as fermentation happens, generally what's going to occur is acidity will go up and the pH will go down a little bit. So I know that we're getting really, really like 100% conversions when we're doing the mash class, and it's just somewhere it's in the 5 ballpark, or somewhere around 5 pH. 6 to 5 is where the enzymes are happy. I don't know if there's a better explanation of that. That's just what I find when I'm using them.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with. I mean, you and I, we talk about different mashes and stuff, and taking notes and keeping notes. And since I've been propagating my own yeast for a while, and I noticed that, I mean, my ferments are going really fast, 3 to 4 days, but my pH, when it's done, my pH will be mid 3s on, quite often. And a lot of people are confused about the pH thing on a mash. Like you said, your pH is going to drop. As your mash reaches the finishing line, your pH is going to drop. Now it may only be 4.5 or 4.2 or whatever. I use strips, so I'm not getting that detailed in the point this or point that. But yeah, I found it interesting. I was like, because I never really paid a whole lot of attention before, but now I'm kind of trying to take notes, and so yeah, it's pretty common to hit mid 3s on a lot of my grain ferments.
Yeah, once you get to the end of fermentation, the more alcohol you have, the more acidic
Acid.
The environment is.
Yeah, it's acid.
And then let's see. So what really got us started on this whole conversation of why are we even talking about enzymes was because Wayne and I had this conversation backstage with Alan Bishop after a previous podcast we were on, and we got on the topic of sweet potatoes, which I do not ferment sweet potatoes, but Wayne is very good at it. I hate fermenting potatoes. I've had some horror stories, some wicked infections learning with potatoes and learning that they have no acidity, so they require a little bit of additional pH adjusting. Specifically, while we're talking about pH, potatoes need some sort of citric acid, like if you add lemons or oranges. But I did not know that, and the first time I made a potato mash, it was like vomit. It smelled like vomit. It was bad.
I started to do a mash. Mama B's on here. Her and Mark and Brian, they did a poaching contest, little back behind the scenes kind of thing, and I was gonna submit a jar for it, and so I was using some grains, but I also had potatoes, and I didn't think about what you just said, about messing with the pH. And I had 2 mashes that just went to shit. It was horrible. I don't have that problem with sweet potatoes, but white potato, russet potatoes, things like that. Yeah, I've encountered that problem.
Yeah. And I adjusted the pH for my second potato mash, and I still got a wicked infection. It was a time of year where there's lots and lots of pollen. Oh, yeah. I was battling the environment where I was mashing in, and there was just layers on pollen on everything where we live.
Right.
So that could have contributed to just, I don't know, foreign bacteria in the mash, but I just never really had a successful potato. But the sprouted sweet potato is just an alternative source of the enzyme, similar to malted grain, which is interesting. Not a lot of people know about that. Also, ants, right? Like ants.
I did not know that.
So certain types of ants, like the ones that are leaf eaters, they have really high amounts of alpha amylase present in their digestive systems in their bodies. So if you get a bunch of ants and you crush them up into a powder of these leaf eating ants, then they have it's a really good concentration of alpha amylase that can be used to convert starches and make beer or alcohol with in some countries. I always thought that was cool. Saliva, ants, apples, so there's it's naturally occurring all over.
Oh Yeah, I read even cherries, figs, that they all have they have enzymes, but they do different things. Not everyone has everything that we need for, for like breaking down starches.
Yeah.
But I was reading some stuff about the 1700s and 1800s, and they're stating that back then, of course, there was no purified enzymes like we have today. Um, they they were using things from plants, from, of course, malts and whatnot, from molds and animal organs for
Yeah.
enzymes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it was then, and it's crazy that they even knew that then.
I wonder if they have ever, because some places that you'll see them taking the intestines of like a cow or a goat,
Mm-hmm.
and they take the bile out of the
Mm-hmm.
stomach, and then they eat it as like a bittering agent. They mix that in soups. I don't think I could ever stomach it, um, but that would be a good source if you take the stomach contents of an animal. You
Right.
could literally. I've the same places that I see them consuming this as a meal, I see them making the chicha where they're like chewing and
Mm-hmm.
spitting the corn. So maybe, just an idea. Maybe I wonder if anybody's ever used the stomach contents of an animal to make alcohol. I'm sure it wouldn't have tasted very good though.
Yeah. So one of the things, like apothecaries back then in the 1800s would use dried pancreas or stomach scrapings for medicinal digestional aids. They contain proteases like pepsin, and it wasn't even isolated. This says until like the 30s or 40s. But yeah, it's crazy. I never knew where rennet to make cheese. I had no idea. I had no idea that it came from a calf stomach.
It does. I didn't know that either. Interesting.
I think I think there's a plant too.
An olive branch. If you take the branch of an olive tree and you put that in cheese, it will. I've seen an Italian person go outside, grab the branch of an olive tree, and they throw it in the cream, and it makes cheese. It curds it.
Wow.
I don't know what it is, but
Okay.
I know the branch of an olive tree will do the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I think nettle. That was what Jennifer was doing some research, and I think nettle can do the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, because that must have something in it that if it obviously irritates your skin, right?
Right.
So there's some kind of enzyme in there bad enough to irritate your skin.
Right.
Yeah. So you wouldn't need enzymes really if you're doing a rum, right? This is more for if you're converting starches.
Don't need them.
Fruits, right? So then there's something called pectic enzyme, and this is commonly seen in fruit mashes.
Mm-hmm.
Pectinase, not to be confused with pectin, because I have some people, I've heard them say, I got this pectin. Is this what I'm supposed to use? So pectin is what they use in jelly, and it will coagulate or thicken. The pectic enzyme or pectinase will do the opposite. It breaks down pectin in fruit.
Breaks down fruit, opens the cell walls, breaks down, makes more sugars available.
Mm-hmm. And you had talked about, or you in your research.
Yeah.
So there's a common belief that some people think that the addition of pectic enzyme in a mash can increase your heads, right? Or the acetaldehydes.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And like I say, I just did a little bit of research on it, but the research that I found contradicts that and says that it's quite the opposite. So I've never, like I say, I told you I don't really use those enzymes. I like when I'm doing apples, I cook mine, so I'm breaking the cell walls down that way. You can freeze them. That also busts the cell walls in fruit. If you ever froze apples and you pull it out of a bag, you can just squeeze it and it just like juice just runs out of them.
Yeah, lots of fruit that's hard to manage. If you freezing and then thawing the fruit definitely makes it so much more easy to mash in. Or letting the fruit come to the cusp of fermentation, right? Peaches, apples, stick them in a barrel, throw them outside somewhere, and let them almost begin to rot. What's going to happen is similar to the potatoes when they start to molt, right? Or the grain when it starts germination with moisture, is there is yeast and there's enzymes in that fruit that's presently there to break the fruit down so that it can rot and grow another plant. But as it starts to, those enzymes will start to break down the fruit for us, right? So that softens the apples. Exactly like when you want to make banana bread, you let the bananas turn black.
Yep.
And they have such more aroma and sweetness, right? That it's almost disgustingly sweet because it's like it's fermenting.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention bananas because Jennifer buys them green and I can't eat them green. I have to wait till they get, if they don't have brown spots all over them, I won't touch them. And if they have brown spots on them, she won't touch them. So she eats the green ones, and then whatever's left, if they start getting spotted, I eat those because I like the
She
sweetness.
prefers the green ones.
She prefers the green ones. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Hey, to each their own. Maybe it's healthier for you or something.
Yeah, maybe. Probably.
Yeah, so I see someone on here, Nathan, is saying, I was always told it would increase the methanol in fruit fermentation.
Yeah, I was told the same thing.
Yep, that's exactly what we're discussing. And then, so...
And I still don't
know for sure, right? So some science shows that it actually does not. But then there's the thought or the theory that you're breaking down, everything. And in fruit in general, especially certain fruits, there is more... of the heads or the foreshots that just come from the fermentation of fruit in general. Right. It's the conversion of that type of sugar to alcohol. And it just, apples is like a number one. It's the best example I can give. If you're used to making whiskey, and you make an apple brandy, you're going to have to adjust how you make your cuts because you're going to notice a lot more concentration of the methanol and acetaldehydes coming off the top of a run from the conversion of fruit in general. That's why some brandies are like, they're kind of fiery when they come off the still. The most smoothest spirit that I found new make is a grain. That's personally for me is a grain. Sugar conversion when it's a rum or brandy when it's a fruit has a little bit of fire to it. I think there's some more volatile alcohols coming off of just sugar or the fruit in general. Right. So then I wonder if people saying that the use of pectic enzyme creates more heads, are they just noticing that there's more heads production because of the type of fruit you're using?
I don't know. Yeah, I have to talk to Alan and see what his thoughts are on this.
Yeah, if anybody in the chat,
or if anybody out there has got any ideas on it.
Yeah, I have heard that, but so I also am total procrastinator, and I have mashed in apples before and not had any enzymes available. And in the first time I did that, I researched it and I was like, oh no, what do I do if I don't have any pectic enzyme? Well, then I quickly found that apples have naturally occurring pectic enzyme and amylase enzyme in them that breaks down the starches and the pectin in the apples for you, and they will just eventually turn to mush on their own.
Yeah, the whole time it's fermenting, those enzymes are probably still active and working.
Yeah, and I think the contribution of enzymes, the pectic enzyme in fruit, what it does is it helps accelerate that process of breaking the fruit down in the beginning stages of fermentation. And then I have seen that it's used for wine because it helps to make a more clarified fermentation or to reduce haze. So they're using it in wine making to reduce haze. Oh, yes. Okay. Pectic enzymes are often used in conjunction with cellulase to improve overall plant material breakdown, such as in juice extraction or waste treatment, because pectin acts as a physical barrier surrounding the cellulose fibrils. That is what I have read. Okay. Thank you, Bad Santa. Yes.
Quit using those big words, Joe.
Yo, he's super smart. I have to shout him out real quick because I have watched his podcast and been just like very, very impressed.
Yeah, he's
blown away by the amount of knowledge that he knows. Thank you for that. Yes. So do you feel, if you're there, do you think does it make more heads? Does it make more methanol or more of the acetaldehydes? Or is it just the type of fermentation and the ingredients we're using, right? So there's always there's two sides to the coin. Right. What's actually happening?
Pears. Mark Morgan says, or Shadow Mark Morgan, he says pears are a lot like apples, and they are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And John Hamilton says skins on or off the apple. Definitely on.
Do you think that when they were doing thousands of pounds of apples, they were peeling them? Heck no. They were mashing in the whole apple. All of it. Seeds and all.
Seeds, stems, guts, feathers, and all. Let her rip, tater chip.
For sure, for sure. You had brought up to me, which I didn't think about, but there was actually on one of the Master Distiller episodes, Thomas Williams was his
Yeah,
name.
Thomas Williams. I believe Thomas was the name. Here we go. So they are him and his family are one of the few people. When we were talking about sweet potatoes, I had to go find out how many distilleries out there are actually currently, actively right now using sweet potatoes. And I found like 4. The 2 that really
That's
came
not
up.
a lot.
Yeah, the 2 that really came up. One of them was Corbin Cash out of California. They make a sweet potato vodka and also do a 80-20 blended whiskey made from sweet potatoes and rye. Delta Dirt Distillery of Helena, Arkansas, which is in my home state, they do. They grow sweet potatoes right there on their farm. 4 generations, I think, and I think the great grandfather or whatever he actually sharecropped that and sold corn whiskey to be able to save up enough money to buy that property. And
Wow.
And it's like 80 something acres that they have. And
So it's a great example of like who is distilling with sweet potatoes, right? The sweet potato farmer is distilling with sweet potatoes.
Exactly. They got 2 whiskey offerings made from corn, sweet potatoes, and rye and barley. They also have a vodka made from sweet potatoes and corn. But yeah, they're really get into these, mashing these sweet potatoes, and that's a lot of work. It really is.
So I see a comment.
Yield. Yeah. What we got?
With apples, the smaller the better as far as cutting. If you are learning cuts, obviously smaller cuts are better when you're figuring it out or learning how to identify what you're smelling, feeling coming off the still. And where you really want to pay attention with apples is that first cut that you make. Now, I'm not talking about the 4 shots cut. Don't let the heads be confused with 4 shots. And I got to say this because I see a lot of people on the internet that are saying that heads is the first cut you make. It's not. So the first alcohol coming off the still is a slight concentration of methanol. Methanol does come out in concentrations throughout the entire run.
Yep.
But the first concentration, because it has a lower boiling point, it's going to come off first. So we discard that small percentage. 5 to 6% is your 4 shots cut. So that's not something you don't taste it, you don't smell it. You just know as a calculation, you want to. Oh wait, sorry, I meant cutting the apples themselves. So okay.
Smaller the better.
Let me just finish that question. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The heads cut is where you just want to pay attention with apples, because I have found that, especially even if you're redistilling apples, the distillate, putting the heads and tails back in, right? If you're doing several runs of apples or several runs of grain, I would take my heads and tails from a previous run and contribute that back into the mash so I get my volume back for efficiency. But with apples, the heads really begins to concentrate. Now, as far as cutting the apples up, shred them or crush them. If you have like a chipper, you can throw them through like a wood chipper and it will literally shred them apart. If you're doing it inside, put them in a barrel, let them get super, super soft, and then use like a 4x4 and crush them by hand. That's generally what I've done because I don't always have access to a wood chipper. But if you got a wood chipper, that's the way to go.
Sometimes like we have, it's called Habitat for Humanity. It's a place down here. So they you can go buy sinks and doors and things like that, stuff that people's got left over from bills or whatever. Sometimes you can find a garbage disposal, a new one.
That's genius.
Yeah. I've seen
people
do it. No, I don't. I would like to have. I've got the old one, the crank, where you just cut them up into wedges and throw them in, and it busts them up into chunks. But really the smaller the better.
Have you introduced yourself and talked about a background on this podcast yet of who you are and what you're skilled at? I don't think you have. I feel like you're too humble.
We don't really talk about what I do on this podcast, but I figure most people that, if you're
like an engineer though, right?
Not a degreed engineer, but that's what I do for a living. Yeah. We design, I'm an engineering manager where I work, and we design tooling that we build components for air conditioners. And so what we do is we get the prints in from the customer. We draw our own prints, 3D models. We take those 3D models and we design tooling to create these parts, whether we're bending them, forming them, brazing them together. And we take that tooling out to production and we produce these parts. But so, yeah, if you got air conditioner going, and chances are I may have made the part that goes on it. We build parts for all the major players.
I was more leaning towards like your steel building business and some of the videos that he makes where he's essentially like an engineer and a machinist. And he uses
machinist by trade.
Perfectionism, right, to build these copper pieces.
Way too kind with your words.
No, it's really cool. It's really cool because you make really, really precision parts for distillation. And then just shout out, like some people watching probably know who I am, but they're going to be like, who the hell is this Wayne guy?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook and YouTube.
On the back a little bit.
Ozark Steelworks. We build all kinds of modular distillation equipment.
Yeah. You are an artist. I saw he makes artwork. Yes, you do.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very pretty. And he's going to build me an antique version of a riveted still, right, Wayne?
Yes, I am. I've got a couple of those I got to build. Gonna be interesting. Yep. Yeah. I started playing around with watching some of these videos of these people in these third world countries that are building these copper pots. They're taking these big sheets of copper, they throw it down in the dirt and they start beating on this and rolling it around and then doing dovetail joints, lap joints like this. And then they braze that up and they hammer all that out. And so that led me to start to do these shot glasses. Get it in there. There we go. And so they're all hammered.
Yes, I have one of those.
Dovetail joint somewhere in there. Hard to see it sometimes. There we are. I don't know if I can get it on the camera, but you can kind of see the dovetail joints. But anyway, it's a rabbit hole. It's a rabbit hole, and I love to just dive into that and build things that nobody else is. I mean, stuff that's been built, but nobody's really doing it now. I mean, there's nobody out there hammering, doing dovetail joints really and hammering stills out.
Yeah, I love the old school
rivets. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm excited to build some of that stuff. I've got some other projects in the works that Alan and I are working on together. Going to have something hopefully this year out that's going to be really, really cool. I'm not going to go into that one, but it's it's
secrets. He's got secrets.
Yeah, I got a secret, but
he's just going to tease us and leave that there.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave that.
So we can't anticipate. No, I'm just kidding.
No, there'll be something.
I'm interested
cool
to hear.
Yeah,
awesome.
But yeah, I enjoy doing stuff like that, and this gives me it's a chance. It's more than just building stills. It's kind of like art. You get to express yourself, and each piece, even though they all, you got a Mr. Fusion head here and a Mr. Fusion head over here. They look the same, but they're all different. Each one's got its own personality and some different spots of blood and tears in it, and but it's all part of it.
Yeah. So I don't know if I kind of sped up by this part, but I wanted to talk about how the difference between using the modern industrialized concentrated enzymes and then the old time way of doing it where you would just be relying on malted barley. And then there's a resurgence that we're seeing right now in the distilling industry where I'm starting to see some distillers who have an appreciation for the history are trying to recreate early American whiskeys or bourbons, right? So they are using older source types of grains. Like Eric Wolf is using a Rosen rye, which is an older Pennsylvania type of rye that would have grown in the region here. There are older corns that we see coming back, like the Jimmy Red corn, the Cherokee White Eagle corn. There's some old corns and just different kinds of small grains being resurrected in general, which is going to help contribute to the flavor profile we would have had back in the day. But what I'm seeing is some distilleries are sacrificing yield and efficiency for flavor, and they are going back. So when our classes are hosted at the Big Creek Distillery in Dahlonega, Georgia.
Hmm.
And the distiller there, Gus, really great guy, but he is using the distiller's malt, and he's relying entirely on distiller's malt and no additional enzymes to do his conversion. So they're really truly
Nice.
doing like an old school American type of whiskey and bourbon there. And I have an appreciation for that, right? Because
Yeah,
they're not
kudos
going
to them.
for quantity over quality,
Yeah,
right?
that-
They're
that-
going
that-
more for the quality.
That takes balls in this day and age for
Yeah,
a distillery to do that.
Yeah, and you're starting to see this more and more where the distillers just have an appreciation for the way it was done, right? And then there's a belief that exists that using the naturally occurring beta amylase in the malted grain and the alpha amylase that's in the malted grain is a cleaner conversion
Yeah.
and makes a smoother whiskey that actually tastes better. And again, I don't know how much of that is true. If anyone in the chat has any explanation of why, other than it's not processed, it's not lab created, it's more natural, right? Why that would
Yeah.
taste better. My number one belief is that it's the percentage of malt and the
I
flavor
agree.
profiles changing from the amount of malt that was used. It's just generally more appealing to people that taste the sweetness of the malt. This is pretty cool.
And I think if you're going to go to that trouble to do that, you got more than just, it's more than just the malt. You're putting your heart in it. You're putting your soul in it. There's a lot of love going into that bottle.
Yeah.
Before it disappears, somebody had a question about a cheap way to start out if you want to make copper products or build copper still. Well, there's not really a cheap way to do it. If you want to build one of the places that I use is Basic Copper. They're online. You can get small pieces, you can get rolls, you can get different sizes, different thicknesses. Do a little research on what kind of still you want to build, what particular style, and figure out what kind of copper, how much you need, and do some research on soldering and seams and just dive into it. Spend more time, spend a lot of time researching before you go spend money on your copper. Copper's really high right now, and hopefully it comes down soon. So if it's going to be a while before you build, you might wait.
Yeah, I have done a little bit of copper work with Huck. There's 2 master distiller competitions where I had to solder and build stuff. One was like the thumper jar system, which that was fairly easy. It was just sweating pipes together. And then the one was the jacketed, the arm condenser, which was a little bit more complex. But I always did like a little workshop with Huck where he would let me practice a little bit and feel more comfortable going into it. We built, and the reason I'm saying this is because it's a lot harder than most people would think it is. Some people look at that and they're like, I can do that, no problem. Tell me where to get copper, I can build this. But I have done it, and I have hand hammered copper to make the horse head, the tapered arm coming off of a cap, and then folded the seams together to make a pipe. That stuff is no joke. It took us hours to get the seam to like meet back together, and it is a lot of labor doing it all by hand like that. And not to scare anybody out of it, but I just have an appreciation for the people that are doing it absolutely perfect. My friends that are still builders, like, because I know I could never do anything like that. A lot of people reach out to me and they're like, how do I build a still? That's not my expertise. My expertise is making alcohol.
Yeah.
Stills go, I'll leave that to my friends that do a much better job than me.
You know, it's crazy how, I mean, it can be as simple as you want it to be, but there's certain, you know, some people are wired like me. I can't, if I build something, I mean, nothing's perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. But if I build something and I see one little thing that just sticks out, you know, and I spot it, I'm like, So I got to go back and rework it, whether it be coming from the inside. And if this is like a little spot, you know, I got to work it back out and smooth everything back over, make sure that it's, you know, I mean, you can form copper, you can, you know, as long as you can reach it, you can work through it. And that's one of the things I love about it is it's really hard. I mean, if you screw up, you can go back and fix it. But the learning process is, the learning curve's can be pretty big, but it doesn't have to be. It's as deep as you want to go. But don't be afraid to build one. But do your research. Do your research and dig around. And there are people doing classes here and there.
Are you
I
going to do a class on how to build a still?
I haven't planned on it.
You do an online one that you can pay for, or subscribe to. Like school has those things
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
People could pay you $10 and see a video on how to do it. Obviously, they're not going to master still building from a video,
right.
but at least it gives someone an idea maybe of if they want to approach it or not. And
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. And so I did do here recently did a video where I was working on a thief, rolling the cone and doing all that stuff. I also did a video where I was building the funnels that I build for Christopher, our you and I, or he's both of our friends over
mhm,
at Motivator Barrels. Chris
yeah,
Conrad, great guy, great
love
guy.
them.
So I did a video, and it's it's condensed, but nobody's going to sit and watch an hour long something or other. They want, they'll spend 20 minutes watching something, or 15 minutes watching something. So I try to
Yeah.
condense it down, but I am going to start doing more videos, more process videos like that of my build process. Um but yeah, the class thing, that's kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, I just figured I would ask because I know someone's going to ask you. I see a question from Brandon Buffington.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what's up, Brandon? He's my friend. He
So
won Master Distiller from the Ancient Grains competition.
yep.
He also gives me really good hiking trails in Tennessee. When he sent me up Rainbow Falls, I was like, hey, man, what is a good hiking trail that I can do? I got off filming early one day and I was like, I'm going to go get some exercise. Well, he sent me up a 5 mile hike up a mountain. And halfway through, I was going to call him and be like, bro, what's wrong with you? Why would you send me on this? But I had no service. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so Brandon asks, what do you think about high temp amylase? Is it worth using? I would say it is definitely worth
Oh
using
yeah.
for efficiency and conversion. And if you're doing a heavy all grain mash, if you have a lot, like if you have over 2.5 pounds per gallon, it becomes like almost necessary to use it. We're even using it at Mount Vernon when they put the hot water, the boiling water into the fermenter barrels. They're mixing it with the high temp liquid amylase. It can go in at the very beginning because as you start to cook your grains, they will begin to get thicker and thicker to the point where it becomes difficult to stir by hand if that's what you're
Right.
doing. And that high temperature liquid amylase is going to work as like a chainsaw chopping up the logs and
Mm-hmm.
helping to thin out your mash. What I like to do in my classes, I like to let it get very thick so that the students can see the thickness, the consistency of oatmeal. Like a heavy oatmeal is what will happen without the high temp alpha amylase. And then you add that amylase in once it's very, very thick, and
Mm-hmm.
then cap it and let it sit for a minute after stirring. Then we come back in 5 minutes, you're going to see that you can literally just, it's a greatly noticeable difference. It's thinned out. You'll start to see liquids actually separating from the starches.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see like this liquid pooling on top, which would not have occurred without the addition of the alpha. The alpha is a thinning agent, really.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to get the enzymes to start working right at the very beginning of your cook. So they are great if you're going to get them. If you're going to get alpha amylase, don't mess around with the powder because some of the powder is not high temperature. The
Right.
liquid high temperature is the one you want to go for. Read the packaging. It says between 190 and 150. I know North Georgia is selling that stuff, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe Prohibition Moonshiner is selling that. Happy belated birthday to him, by the way. It was just his
Yep.
birthday.
Happy
But he
birthday,
sells the
bro.
high temp liquid stuff. It's really good.
Jeff Caldwell, he's asking what was the website for getting the copper. Basic Copper is one of the websites that I use to get copper. Like I say, it's the prices right now on copper. The Comex is up there pretty high, as high as it's been in a very, very long time. Silver is up too. I use silver solder on most of my stuff, hard solder, so it's like 45% silver. It's very expensive, so hopefully it comes back down soon, because I have to
Silver
buy.
prices are crazy right now.
Yeah, I know, and I'm gonna have to start raising prices because I can't afford the cost of the alloy is crazy. But I couldn't do some of the things that I do with soft solder the way that I build my stuff. So, yeah, it's gonna be what it's gonna be.
Billy also has liquid amylase also.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of guys that are selling these products, just go out and support them. I like to shout out my friends. Go support the small business guys that are working hard, and they're making these products more available for us, right? Because you might not know what it is, but if you watch Philbilly, he's going to show you how to use it. He's going to show you where to get it from, and it all kind of it's encompassed into how we like to share information.
Chris Hayes got a question, Amanda. He says, so if I'm going to do a flake oats mash, I can add the high temp to the water before adding the flake oats.
Yeah, so you can add the high temp to the water as long as it's not above 190 degrees. That's the point where you'll denature that enzyme. Normally, when you transfer your water, right, like the way I mash and the way I'm going to talk about is steeping, where you're boiling water in a vat, a pot, or your still, and then you're transferring it into your fermenter tank, a barrel, or whatever you're going to use. But you transfer your hot water and then add the grains. So as you're transferring the water, you can begin to put some of that enzyme in there, because as soon as the water transfers over with boiling, it's going to reduce the temperature generally down to 190. So add it below 190. But flake oats is rolled oats, essentially, which is flake corn. And in the flake process, it's a little bit more expensive because it has been steamed and gelatinized for you.
Pre-gelatinized, yeah.
Right. So you don't really need to do the whole cereal cook method with those. And as far as I know, I don't know that amylase is that necessary with rolled grains, with the rolled oats. I don't think it. They kind of just are serialized, right? They just fall apart.
Well, yeah, but they still, all they're doing is releasing the starch. You still have to convert that starch to sugar, so you got to have an enzyme source for those. Yeah, they're not malted grains, so but they are pre-gelatinized. They just make your job a little easier mashing in.
Yeah. Like it's whether you're using rolled or flaked grains, they've been steamed and then rolled. So that's why they look that way. And in that process, it gelatinizes them and breaks them down, so they're very easy to cook and they will kind of just disintegrate. Similar to if you're adding cereal, like wheat bran, raisin bran, corn flakes. Some people will say that there is potassium sorbate added to cereal and that will interfere with the yeast, but the levels that they add is not going to really impede your fermentation too much.
I've made a few batches of corn flakes.
Yeah. And a real cool secret that I like to tell is if you like wheat, right? Like I always say, who here loves a wheated whiskey, right? And then if you're using wheat, you might be like, this tastes like wheat, but I don't know. Some people are learning, tasting, and nosing will not know initially how to identify where that wheat is when they taste the spirit. If you really want the wheat to stand out and you're struggling with getting the wheat to come forward, at the end of your mash, take a box of raisin bran or wheat bran and add that in. It will just kind of disintegrate. It's fermentable sugar, it's grain, but the serialized wheat that's in cereal especially has a more recognizable wheat flavor that we're used to. That's what, if I tell a stranger what does wheat taste like, most people would not have eaten raw wheat, but they will have eaten some kind of a wheat cereal, right? And that's and identifying in your brain, it'll register like, I taste that. I get the wheat now. It helps to bring the wheat forward in a wheat whiskey. I like to, it's like a little secret thing I add in there. Malted wheat will bring the sweet wheat flavor forward, but if you don't have that, cereal. Mark Morgan?
Yeah. He says, I know my opinion, but what's y'all's opinion on low temperature amylase, the importance? Well, yeah, we did cover that. You got to have, that would be the beta amylase. Both are needed. I mean, the alpha is just going to, like Amanda said, it's just cutting these up into chunk fire logs, big chunks.
I have a little thing here.
Yeah.
See if I can pop that back up.
Yeah, that's a great explanation right there.
So the glucoamylase, I think, is what you're referring to, Mark, when you're talking about the low temperature, because that is the last or the lowest temperature range. The glucoamylase is going to, hold on, share screen, share window. Our glucoamylase is going to work on the end stages of breaking down the starches and the unfermentable sugars for us. So alpha does the heavy lifting and the heavy legwork. It's like a chainsaw. When you cut down a tree, it's going to branch it and cut it into big logs for you. The beta amylase is then going to go back in and cut it into, like, split the wood into manageable pieces that you can burn on your fireplace. The glucoamylase is going to take that and break it down into kindling, right? So that's a great metaphor. Like to explain what they do. But the glucoamylase is also like a little bit of an insurance policy, right? At the very end, it's going to break down all the other hard complex sugars that are left over. To get complicated, there's maltose and glucose, right? And it's going to break down the glucose on the final stage levels. This will work after you pitch the yeast as well, for several hours after you're done cooking your mash. In the beginning of your fermentation, for the first day or so, it's going to break down whatever's left that hasn't been broken down. So it's like that little bit of Band-Aid that goes in at the very end. And an interesting thing that I saw that when we finish cooking the mash in our class and we go to take our gravity reading to see how much fermentable sugar that we've gotten out of the cooking the grains and using our enzymes, we'll put the glucoamylase in at the end before we pitch the yeast. But what I notice is I'll take a gravity reading and I'll let that the beer hydrometer sit there as we talk about other things. I'll usually talk about yeast for a little while, propagating yeast, different ways to access yeast. If anybody wants an episode on yeast, propagation, history of yeast, different types of yeast. I just had someone in one of my subscribers in my subscriber group ask me to make her a list of different types of yeast for fruit and grain. So I did a very thorough, brief breakdown that talked about yeast properties and different types of yeast that you can use for the job. But I think that could be like its whole own episode. But as I do my yeast conversation, because it's a huge rabbit hole, right? I mean, we could talk about yeast forever. We go back and check the beer hydrometer. And what happens is that gravity goes up a little bit.
Yep.
So the enzymes are still working, and specifically at around 100 degrees where you're about to add your yeast, the glucoamylase enzyme is what's working at that low temperature. The alpha amylase is not really working with any type of efficiency at a lower temperature. So below 150, the alpha is not really working for you anymore. You got to make sure that it does most of its work in the beginning when you're holding it at that higher temperature to cook the initial grains. And then the addition of the adjunct grains later on, or your malted grains, is going to go in below 149. That's where your beta amylase is going to start to work. That's its temperature range where it's efficient. And as you bring the mash down, or the mash slowly cools down and you're about to add or pitch your yeast, that's right around the time you add the low temperature amylase enzymes. And it's the glucoamylase that will continue to work. I think what I'm familiar with seeing is it works around 110 to 90, but I believe, again, that's a general range for efficiency. It's still going to work below 90 degrees, just going to slow down.
Right.
But it's not necessary. Like, you could probably go without it, but it's going to be more efficient for you, and it's going to make sure that you're extracting all of your fermentable sugars from your grains and getting the full flavor and the full efficiency out of your fermentation.
And maybe we can get Mike on here. Let's talk about yeast. He's such a yeast nerd.
Yes, yeah. I did like a little TikTok video with him where we experimented, and he is my yeast go-to. When I was doing master distiller, I needed a fermentation. I wanted to do honey. And first time I ever met Mike Dombrowski, I was referred, I was told by my farmer, Robert McDonald, he was like, call this guy. He knows how to make cherry bounce. His distillery does it. I can't remember the name of his distillery. It's in Allentown. Oh, it's like on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, he made cherry bounce. And he does a honey fermentation of boilo, which is like a honey fermentation, and then it's a spiced honey, similar to cherry bounce, just eliminate the cherries. But he literally was like, what do you need? Anything you need. Dude brought me honey, cherries, and then Kvike yeast, and recommended, one of the greatest gifts ever was introducing me to Kvike yeast.
That's my go-to.
I was like, I don't know where to get it from. He overnighted it to me and had it shipped to me, and then told me how to use it because it sped up the fermentation. It's the only yeast I will use with honey fermentation, because if you're doing honey and you don't have a Kvike yeast historically is a Nordic mead yeast. So I believe they derived the first strain of it when they began to really propagate it and sell it commercially. They found a Nordic mead stick, or like a matchstick, a wooden stick, because yeast can live in wood. Ooh, I have your other image of your little yeast log here somewhere. Yeast can live in wood for hundreds of years. Yeast can also crystallize and live in its crystallized stage for hundreds of years. And then that allows us to go back and harvest that yeast and try to reactivate it and propagate it again. So this yeast for hundreds of years has been used to convert honey into mead. And then today we have it for a mead yeast, but it works phenomenally with honey. Whereas if you were to use a dry active distiller's yeast, what's going to happen is you're going to have all the residual sweetness, and what you recognize, the aroma and the flavor of honey, will be destroyed and taken away in the fermentation. But using the Kvike yeast, one, takes the honey process, the fermentation, which can take 14 to 21 days to work off. Thank you. And expedites that into 5 to 7 days. What you see in the photo here, Wayne, you want to explain that?
Okay, so what you see here is the grain cap is about dropped. It's getting close to being dropped, but my yeast logs are floating there on top. They are some barrel staves pieces that I had previously used to mature some spirits, and when they're used up, I drill a bunch of holes through them, and I use them for yeast propagation. Or I did. Now, most of the time, everything I do now is I keep liquid, a liquid yeast. So, but I've got several that I do, and the Kvike, the Voss Kvike, is one that I've been doing for probably a little over a year now.
It's fairly easy to propagate, right?
It is. It is fairly easy to, yeah, and it will mutate and it'll change. This one, when I first got it, it wasn't quite as dominant and mean as it is right now. But now it'll choose to ferment, lickety split, and it even it's kind of became a little temperature tolerant too. It likes 90 degrees or better, but I've been doing it out here in the wintertime with a couple of aquarium heaters in a single barrel, just using that, and keeping it about 75 degrees, and it's still whooping it out in 3 days. So
right, and then the use of that and other things, right, like in your whiskey, in your brandies, it helps to bring over floral flavors. It helps to bring over sweetnesses that may not have been there before.
I've used it on sweet potatoes. I've used it on grains. I've used it on fruits. Did a wine with it, and it's really versatile. Probably the most versatile yeast I've ever seen.
I see a question from Christopher. Mead is the oldest form of fermentation, correct? So mead is probably one of the oldest, but I believe the fermentation of bread is post-dates mead. So that could be debatable, right? There is, when I do the history of alcohol, there is one of the oldest recorded recipes. So the oldest recorded written recipe, which was word of mouth, is a poem or a story, Mesopotamia, I believe, where it talks about a bear, and the bear's saliva, which would have been enzymes, was used to help to break down and ferment honey and making a mead. So that is one of the oldest recorded stories. It's like a god of fermentation or beer or something, right? And then I don't know the poem. It's translated through Mesopotamian text, but it talks about, it's one of the oldest documented recipes, because the story, the song, or the poem tells you how to make alcohol, and that is a mead recipe. But then there's the whole, what came first, right? The beer or the bread? And I think probably the bread came first.
I would say so.
Because then they learned that cooking the bread was doing the conversion for them, right? By taking the bread and cooking it in the oven, then it was easier to break down and easier to make alcohol from. So the conversion of bread to alcohol is very old too. Which comes first? I don't know. Probably one of the oldest things I read is the honey fermentation, but I can't say for sure. It is one of the oldest for sure.
So Jeff's asking about, can you buy that yeast anywhere? You can get on Amazon. There's several varieties of Kvike, Hornadol, Voss, but
Kviking, I would recommend a liquid one, right? They're better they do have powdered ones, but the temperature stabilized ones you got to keep cold that are liquid are going to just work better in general, reactivate better, be easier to propagate. And And it's expensive. It's an expensive investment for anybody who's thinking about doing it, but it's totally worth it because when I first got a batch of the Kvike, I got a couple packets sent to me. I made a mash with it. Then I took what that yeast does is it flocculates. Flocculation is when the yeast bodies are all over, and at the very end they come to the bottom. They fall to the bottom. Like koji, or not koji. What is that stuff called? Hold on. Kombucha. Right? It has a mother yeast. It's a mother yeast. And that's what the Kvike will do. It will make like this chunk of yeast in the bottom of your mash or the slurry. And it's very easy to then take your mash off the top and leave that in the bottom of a barrel. And if you're fermenting regularly and you're mashing in regularly, then it's very super easy to do the lazy propagation where you just make a new mash, take the couple bottom inches of that yeast slurry of your Kvike and boom, put it in your next mash. I did it for years. I stopped buying yeast and I just kept putting the end of one mash into the next. There is dead yeast bodies, which is one of the best yeast nutrients from the yeast, dying off and then replicating because yeast is cannibalistic. So the easiest thing for it to consume are dead yeast bodies, and that's what it will go for first, even over yeast nutrients that you've added additionally. But it's just an amazing source of nutrients, and it's also similar to like adding a sour mash and taking a little bit of that unworked off mash or the spent mash or the dunder or whatever and adding that into your next wash. But it's a super easy way to propagate that yeast. It's a very easy yeast to propagate.
I've been with mine exactly what you're doing. Normally, when I'm pulling my mash off to strain it and do a run, I'm also mashing in. And as soon as that mash is done, it's going right back in the same barrel I just pulled that out of. There's this layer in the bottom, and it'll just kick. When I'm not doing that, I keep a liquid culture down in the other little fridge, and I will bring that. It's in a quart jar. I will bring that out the night before and crack the lid on it so it doesn't build pressure because it's going to warm up and get busy. I'll let it sit there and it'll get to going again because when I put it away, there were still some sugars. I stopped it mid fermentation. I let it bud and let it get going, and I put it in the fridge. And when it calms down, I tighten the lid, and then it's ready for me the next time. So I'll take it out the night before and let it get active, and then I will, when I go to pitch that, I'll pitch about 3/4 of that. And once that gets going, I will take and pull back out of that mash to refill my jar back up from the barm on top. And I'll let it go for a day or so because it's got fresh mash. And then I will do the same thing. Put it back in the fridge with the lid loose, let it calm down, and then tighten the lid up.
I think again, yeast is a topic. Even when I'm teaching my class, I have to be so careful to just go on like what's important because we only have so much time to do each topic. And it's just a rabbit hole. I think we should do a whole episode about yeast. And
that'd be great.
There's a lot of people that can even speak more eloquently than we can about yeast and yeast propagation, but it's another essential part of distilling history, but also being self-reliant in your distilling knowledge and your capabilities. Learning how to ferment and distill is obviously the number one things you need to learn how to do and dial in, but then learning how to malt grains, right, to make your own enzymes, and then learning how to capture and propagate your own yeast are essential parts of just being able to distill like your forefathers did, but you don't always have access to the internet, homesteading, if people aren't always able to ship it to you. But to have it constantly being made on your property makes it super convenient. So killing yeast and adding it back will be beneficial to your mash. Yeah, so when I talk about yeast nutrient, there's the kind that you can buy online. You can also make it, right? So you can actually take yeast, put it in on a cookie sheet and cook it in your oven at a very low temperature, like 115 degrees. It's enough to kill the yeast, 120 degrees, but not burn it. And then you have dead yeast bodies, and that is one of the best yeast nutrients that yeast can eat. You can also, actually, Daniel Maynard, one time when we were doing a master distiller, we're talking about this, and he goes, another way to do it? And he just pours the yeast into the boiling water. So when you have your water at a rolling boil, you can pour a little bit into the boiling water. But what he showed me later was actually very interesting. So then he showed me his mash later after we had boiled it to kill the yeast, right, at the boiling temperature. As the temperature got a little bit lower, it was still a pretty high temperature, but the yeast that was in there that we thought we had killed by boiling it was still, some of it was still active, and it was pushing the grains up to the surface, and you could see foaming and a slight bit of fermentation occurring at a high temperature. So daddy yeast is a good nutrient. Dad's yeast.
I seen
Daddy. Yeah. Some yeast have nutrients added to them. You just have to read what you got.
a good friend of mine, Nate Briscoe, just said a while ago, I see a Pat Heist episode coming up. Pat would probably frown on the way that I propagate my yeast, but just from what I've read about him, and but he is a genius and a mastermind when it comes to yeast and enzymes, and
he's Wilderness Trail.
Yeah.
Is that the distiller from? Yeah. So I've watched some of his talks.
Anybody that's using Firm Solutions, if you use Firm Solutions enzymes, that's where they're coming from.
Okay. Oh, he's creating that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Lab.
Well, they sell them. I'm assuming. I don't know exactly how they're procuring them or where they're getting them, but yeah, he does sell those.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeast, an awesome topic that we could literally go into forever, and it's just important. It's important to know how to use your enzymes, know how to malt grain. I feel like is an essential skill that you should have, and it's the way that distilling has been done in the past for a lot longer than the last 100 years, right? It's just people were not ordering yeast and enzymes online; they were making them, and without that yeast and enzymes, we wouldn't have any alcohol. So the enzymes are just as important as the yeast is, really, in an all grain mash. Without them, you're not getting anything. So dead yeast and water, right? So you can use a little bit of your spent mash that's worked off. The mash on the bottom is where a lot of the yeast bodies are going to fall to, and a scoop of that into your next mash can be how you introduce your yeast and yeast nutrient. Or you cook your yeast in the oven and kill some of it.
Boil it.
I like to use raisins. It's an easy way where I'm not wasting my yeast. I'm either using a little bit of spent mash because there's already, if you're distilling over direct heat, propane or electrical element, you're straining your mash. And there's a lot left over in the bottom of your fermenter tank. And at the bottom of that or when you're straining, what's at the very bottom is usually where the yeast settles. You'll see it. It's like a slurry. Mm-hmm. You want to avoid putting that in your pot anyway, because it's going to give a yeasty flavor to your distillation. So you avoid adding the settled yeast at the bottom to your distillation or your mash that you're putting in the pot, and it's left over and often discarded. But what that is an excellent source of yeast nutrient. It's a way that when sour mashing, they were taking some of that dunder. It's in the dunder that you take out of your pot. It's in the bottom of the barrel of your mash, right? It's a quick, easy way to do it. Yep. You don't have that sitting around, what most of us do, then you can just boil the yeast or cook it in the oven or use raisins, or they sell yeast nutrient packets. It looks like rock salt. I forget what the chemical is that they call it, but I personally just don't like to use some lab created chemical that I don't know what it is. I would rather put in raisins or some spent mash or something that I know what it is. I know what I put in it. I know how to consume it. Yeah. That's just easier for me than to put in whatever kind of
nutrient.
Yeah. You remember what is yeast nutrient? I forget what they call it. Diammonium phosphate or something.
Yeah, it's DAP, diammonium something. Yeah, it's worth standing when you need him. But yeah, he would know exactly what it is. But yeah, it's DAP. It's referred to as DAP, and it's. Yeah. It doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of it to energize a ferment, to feed a ferment. But I don't like it. Has a taste that's left, and
okay, yeah,
you can't get rid of it.
For example, turbo yeast, right?
Yep.
Turbo yeast is an excessive amount of yeast nutrients that is intended to rapidly force the yeast to overeat. And rapidly make more alcohol for you. So what that does is it stresses the fermentation because there's so much nutrients that it forces the yeast to engorge itself, and it makes off tasting alcohol or smelling alcohol in it, but the amount of nutrients that they put in it, then you also have to have like another stage of, there's like A and B. B is what makes all the crap that they add in it fall out, but it definitely changes the flavor.
Yeah, I like to use good old natural yeast. I don't want any turbo yeast or no added nutrients. I know there are some, I hear Alan talk about, there are some that he does recommend, but I don't think the stuff that we actually can get our hands on there. Big distillers can get their hands on them, but the people like us at home, it's a little harder.
Yeah, I mean, and most fermentations, they don't always need the yeast nutrient, right?
No.
Like sugar does.
You can
Rums that are just sugar, they kind of require nutrients.
A good handful of crushed malt is a good nutrient. That's nitrogen. I would much rather use something like that, or tomato paste, or something besides that wheat bran. Box of Wheaties. That's something for
that's
the
what
yeast to
Mark
eat.
and Huck use. They finish off the mash, they put a gallon bag of crushed up wheat bran on the top, and they cap it like that, and they walk away. And that's the yeast, the enzymes, and the nutrient all boom right there in that one bag.
That's cool. Wow, it's been going 2 hours already.
Yeah, man, that was good. I feel like we covered all the topics we wanted to touch on. Right?
I think so. Had some great questions. A lot of people popping in and out here. A great episode. I had a good time.
Yeah, this was very fun. Thanks. You wanna call it?
Yeah, we can.
Is there any more questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we can answer a few questions. People's got some questions. Make sure I didn't miss any.
I use turbo yeast and sugar wash. What would you use instead of that? Okay, so it depends on what is your goal. If you're looking to make volume of alcohol and neutral flavored spirit, which tends to be what people are trying to make with sugar wash, then you're probably okay. If you're going to take that alcohol, distill it to a really high proof, and then flavor it post-distillation flavored, I have a lot of students that are happy with the turbo yeast. If you're making a spirit to drink off the still new make as a clean spirit, I would recommend using a different yeast than turbo yeast, just because of the flavor it imparts. To me, honestly, my experimentation with turbo yeast, I got lots of a chemically taste, sort of like plastic or a Band-Aid in the clean distillate. In place of that, I would recommend something like a Daddy, a dry active distiller's yeast that has a higher alcohol tolerancy. I believe. Yeah, something with a closer alcohol tolerancy. Anytime you're taking a fermentation that should take 5 to 7 days, and you're expediting that and crushing all that activity for the yeast down into 2 days, it's stressing the fermentation, it's stressing your yeast, and it's going to create off flavors and aromas. If that's all you're used to, you might not be able to identify that, but switching that out for a different type of yeast, not forcing the fermentation to occur more quickly than it should naturally, it would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Somebody at Lip Service Cruise asking, have you worked with Firm Solutions yet? I have personally not used that brand of enzyme. It may come from the same place. I use most of the time is Sebstar, Sebstar HCl, which they all work pretty close to the same. I don't know what North Georgia carries or Prohibition.
I know North Georgia has a couple different types of yeast, maybe like 2 different brands of yeast nutrient. But like for me personally, I've always used raisins. When I do a sugar wash, I'll put raisins in it. Honestly, I saw Mina Pratt. I saw her Mina Kilo. I'm sorry, Mina. I'm not sure. I know she changed her name. But I saw her doing it in a sugar wash years ago. And I love the idea of it. And I was like, damn, that's a good idea. I'm going to start doing that. So I have done it. I had previously used Raisin Bran in my whiskey mashes, but I saw her do it in a sugar wash. And I just like the raisins. It's natural. If it's going to contribute anything to flavor, it's going to be a positive flavor contribution, as opposed to something that you might just taste that doesn't belong there. And I don't know. It adds tiny bit of fruitiness if it contributes anything. Usually it's very mild and you don't get anything from it. Plus, we all have raisins in our cabinets. Like, who doesn't have raisins? If you go into that weird cabinet that you never go into the back of, I guarantee you there's raisins in there. Everybody's got them in their house. Yeah. I don't care who you are. And if not, then you go stock up on raisins.
Oh, yeah. So Nate Nicholson, he says, what's the best way to crush your corn if you don't have a little mill? That's a tough one because corn, and they're all different. Some of them are a little easier to crush than the others. Flour corns are a little softer. You start getting into those Indian corns and they're really, really hard, the flint corns. I guess I would just suggest get you a little hand crank mill if you're not doing a whole heck of a lot.
They have on Amazon right now is a really efficient one that's like $120. It's on like a little metal stand and you can make cardboard jute for it. That chews through grain. It's $120. Before I had anything, I used a food processor or a blender. Yeah. I did break both of them.
Yeah, I was going to say you'll break a blender.
They're not made to handle grinding up your grains. If you are really at a hard place and you don't have a food processor, or your wife won't let you use her blender because you're going to break it, you can buy corn that's ground up. You can just try to find your corn that's already that way. It's to your advantage to grind it yourself for freshness and quality of your grains. Because if it's ground previously before it gets to you, then it's going to become stale more quickly. So I think grinding it yourself helps the flavor a little bit.
Yeah, if you got a granary anywhere close, that does the animal feed and stuff, they might grind it for you. You might hit them up. Hell, they might sell you the corn ground up already, the way you want it.
Yeah, there's lots of cheap grinders out there. I was given one that they sell at Tractor Supply. It's fantastic for grinding in a small space indoors. It's round and it screws onto like a 20-gallon plastic barrel. So it traps all the dust inside of it. It's fantastic. My Chris Yahara actually from Last Shot Distillery, he upgraded to a better grinder and then gave me that one. He was using it for his distillery. So he was doing commercial grinding all of his grains that went into his mash with that grinder, and then he gave it to me because he was done with it. But it's great because use any other kind of grinder indoors, and literally there's just dust everywhere. My laptop still has dust on it from grinding grains in our last class. I can't get it out.
I've got one of the ones that that's got the motor and the little bin on it for and it comes out, but the dust goes everywhere. I take an old T-shirt and I cut the sleeve section out and I use it like a chute.
I gotta plug in my laptop. Hold on one second.
Okay,
it's gonna die.
So Brandon Buffington says, "What do you think about pickling lime for neutralizing pH in a sour mash?" Anytime your pH drops to where it's a danger, I wouldn't mess with it unless of course I wouldn't mess with it unless it's becoming a problem. But if pH is a problem and your mash is stalling, I would definitely pickling lime is the way to go. Now there's things you can do. You can add oyster shells before your fermentation starts as a buffer, and they will help keep your ferment buffered, pH buffered a little bit. But to correct one, definitely pickling lime works real good.
There's stabilizer too, which has equivalent amounts of citric and what's the other one? Calcium carbonate.
Yeah.
So it just doses equal amounts so that as you add that to your water, it will balance out whatever's high and low and try to bring it to a neutral pH. I got to go grab a 3-prong extension cord. Hold on.
Okay, go for it. Let's see. I believe you can buy whole corn. See if they grind it for you. Get the freshest. Yep. And everybody on corn, the people say, just crack corn. Yeah, crack corn's fine. I prefer to grind mine a little finer because I get a better yield. Crack corn is fine. It takes a little longer for it to absorb, get all the starches into suspension. But that's just opinion. Some people don't like it. Some people just like to use cracked corn right out of the bag, and there's nothing wrong with that. It works. Let's see. We got any other questions? Chris has got a feed grinder that runs off the bells of the tractor. Heck yeah. I tell you what, I've had some of those little Victoria type mills and rigged up a drill. I don't know how many. I burned up a couple drills. using those. They work, but they last a lot longer if you will go in stages. Let's see. Anybody else got any other questions? Oyster shells, yeah. Oyster shells in a mesh bag. Absolutely. They're especially for stuff that needs them. Like a wash using sugar. Oyster shells are a great buffer. They're not so great for correcting a pH, but they will help buffer one from the beginning. What about fresh sweet corn right off the cob? Absolutely. And if you're growing sweet corn, you might look into a cane press and go ahead and take those stalks and press those too. They're sweet. There's sugar in those stalks. You can press those sweet corn stalks and mash that right in there with your sweet corn.
I'm back. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Yeah, we just answering a couple questions. Have you ever done sweet corn, Amanda? Fresh sweet corn right off the cob?
Yes. Honestly, one of the best corn whiskeys I have ever made. Because we fermented the cob and everything. Mm-hmm. My farmer had a whole bunch of leftover corn. So I recommend if you want to do sweet corn, go to a farmer stand, find your local farmer's market, somewhere they're selling sweet corn. Go to the end of the weekend, and whatever they can't sell at the end of the weekend, there's usually always corn left over. Try to convince him that you're going to haul it off for him so he doesn't have to get rid of it. That's what I did. I got a crap ton, like pallets of corn, and we processed it, mashed it all in. I did adjust with a little bit of sugar, but it was so good. I think because what's happening is the sugar's readily available, right? So it hasn't converted into a starch yet.
Right.
Because it's not dry.
Stage, right.
As it dries, it converts into a starch. And then we have to use enzymes to convert it from a starch back into a simple sugar. So if we just harness the sugar when it's readily available, there's less conversion occurring, and maybe it makes a sweeter, smoother spirit, or I don't know, but it just tastes damn good.
I'm going to have to try that. I've never done one.
No. It's a lot of work unless you have like a wood chipper, which I watched videos and there's people using like the pineapple core thing to get the corn off the cob. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. No problem. No, it doesn't work like that. I wound up using a butcher knife and a cutting board on the ground outside, and my chickens were all over the place eating the corn. It was definitely an interesting experience, but you don't have to then do the whole cook thing, right? Like if you just grind up that corn, I heated up and boiled the water to sterilize everything. Right. And then used it to get it up. I needed the heat, obviously. So, but you don't really have to do the whole conversion with sweet corn. It's a lot easier to mash in once you have it processed. It's harder to process, but easier to cook.
Yeah. No, I don't want to do a tutorial on mash with a Philbilly's pickle still. I'll leave that to Phil.
What was it? A pickle still?
Yeah. Remember when Phil did the little still out of a pickle jar?
Oh, I love that video. Did he do the video? I found a video in
he did
going into another jar.
Yeah. I don't. There may be others, but yeah, I know he did one. Let's see. What about frozen super sweet corn?
Yeah. So Prohibition does that, and it's the same as using fresh corn. The frozen corn is obviously easier to process because it was already processed for you. I've never used the frozen. I've used the whole corn, the cob, and I did grind the cob and all, because the cob, when it's fresh, still has fermentable sugars in it. As it dries on the stalk, then the sugars and the starches form as starches into the kernels, and there's less fermentable sugar in the cob, but it's still there. It's still present, especially when it's fresh.
Same way with we were just talking about that before you were getting your cord. The corn stalk itself, the cane, the juices in that is sweet. And if you have a way to press those out, like a little small cane press, you could add that to your mash water. Increase your flavor, add a little sugar.
Yeah.
Let's see. Joe says Vever has a grain mill that's 3,000 watts, wet and dry capable, small commercial grinder, pretty good deal at $185. Yep. I've got one of those similar to that. It's not a Vever, but yeah, they work great. How long should you let multiple fruits, bananas, strawberries, grapes, and blueberries, sit to ferment? I say till it's done. um, sometimes fruits can take longer.
Depending on the weather, right? Some fruits are shorter fermentation, like peaches are quick.
Yeah.
Apples take a long time.
Yeah. So,
All right. So what's ideas for the next podcast? What do you think?
we can do yeast. I'm all down with that.
Yeast. If anybody has controversial topics, we like the controversial topics.
Oh yeah, we can do that. I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out between now and then.
Yep.
That'd be awesome.
All right, so I'm gonna call it because we've been on now for almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So that went good. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in,
thanks
supporting.
for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching. The proof is out there. This is Wayne's new podcast, so definitely trying to get the word spread. He's very intelligent, and we got a lot of good networking, a good group of people, so he should have some interesting people on this podcast in future episodes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda, for coming on again. This is the second time you've jumped in with us, right?
Yeah, man, you gotta support your friends in their endeavors, and we all can get better together. We learn from each other. I learn from everybody. I learn from the questions that people ask me because I'll go and research stuff. And yeah, I appreciate everybody watching. If it wasn't for you guys coming out here and supporting us, we wouldn't be doing this, right?
Yep. And check us out on Spotify. We're on Spotify. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. Amanda's got this cast on her social media. It's on mine. We're just trying to get it out everywhere. And really appreciate everybody. There was a lot of people coming in tonight and comments. It was great.
You hung in there till the end. Thank you so much for your time. Yep. We appreciate you. Hopefully you learned something new, or you figured out something you didn't know before.
And if you got any ideas, hit me up. Shoot us some ideas at ozarksteelworks@gmail.com. I'm always open to ideas for the show. Anything you want to talk about your class or anything before we go, or where they can reach you, or people can
so I have you can find out for our classes are available with information, photo galleries of previous classes. It's ubdistilling.com, capital U, capital B, distilling.com. You can reach out to me directly with distilling questions, or if you have any, you wonder if the class is right for you have any questions about the class. It's basically targeted for beginner to intermediate. We keep numbers really small so we can meet every individual's needs. I have experienced distillers coming in. I have brewers. I have people that own distilleries, own wineries. It's a really fun weekend. We structure it so it's kind of like just personal. We eat meals together and we do like a fire pit cookout. We host that at North Georgia Still Company and Big Creek Distilling Company currently, while we are building our classroom at our distillery in Virginia. And yeah, we have, I believe there's one seat left for February. So that sold out in like a day or two. Wow. And then I had a cancellation for February, so it was just later down the road. So there was one seat left for the February class, 13th and 14th. And then we did just put March dates up on the website. So nice. March, I believe, is also 13th and 14th. And I'm pretty excited. We're going to do some fun stuff. So I have a special mash and spirit we're going to do for Valentine's Day weekend because we will be in class on Valentine's Day. So we're going to do a chocolate cherry whiskey. And then we're going to make a mash, which will be for St. Patty's Day, because the next class in March will be St. Patrick's Day, where we're going to actually be making an Irish whiskey, a single malt.
Nice.
So, yeah, very excited about the little themed classes. Every class is a little bit different, but those are the new things that we're going to get into. Yeah, so hit me up on social media. I try to answer questions as many as I can. I get inundated with messages on Facebook, and they're not always the most polite. So I generally have a hard time keeping up with the Facebook messages. My customer care at ubdistilling.com is a great way to reach out to me. All my students have that. I do consulting. So if you get our class, you're going to get ongoing consulting and help with any questions that you have whenever you need it.
Nice.
But yeah, reach out to me at customer care at ubdistilling.com. I'm on Facebook. I suck at all the other social media platforms. If you think you're talking to me online, you most likely are not. So
awesome.
Yeah. Thanks
All right.
everybody for watching.
Yep.
Y'all
Thanks
rock.
everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next month.
Oh, and I'll be on Moonshiners next week.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, gotta
I
check it
saw
out.
a preview. I don't know how much of the episode I'll be on, but hopefully the storyline with me starts in it next week. So yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yep. Thank you, Amanda. Later,
Thank you,
y'all.
Damon.
Refreshing.
Oh, wait, are we still rolling?
Oh!